Welcome to Buddhism Seeds, a small sanctuary where your soul can rest, where gentle sounds and slow storytelling carry you away from the noise outside and back into the stillness within. In a world that never stops rushing, we often forget that the mind also needs sleep, a chance to let go of the endless stream of thoughts. Each day, we push ourselves under pressure, carrying worries, responsibilities, and the constant noise of modern life. At night, even when the body lies down, the mind refuses to rest old stories, and tomorrow's plans keep spinning like an unstoppable wheel. And in those moments, what we need is not more effort, but release. Release the frantic pace. Release the noise inside your head so each breath can soften and the mind can settle like a lake growing still. That is why we bring you this 3-hour journey of Zen tales, ancient stories light as wind flowing like water, that will gently whisper you into deep sleep, as if wrapped in the arms of peace. Lie down comfortably. Let each muscle loosen. Let these slow words soothe away every layer of your fatigue. And now, as your breath grows calm, let us begin the first Zen story. Long ago, in the courtyard of an old temple hidden in a distant valley, lived a young novice who had just shaved his head. Every morning, while the temple bell still echoed through the mist, he would rise, quietly sweep the mossy stone yard line, up the sandals neatly at the porch, and wipe the dew off the lotus leaves in the pond. His days were as light as breath, as slow as drifting incense smoke, yet inside his heart held a burning longing spring. Because in the center of the courtyard, beside a weathered ancient well, stood a centuries-old peach tree. Its trunk was gnarled, the cracks on its bark like ancient scripts carved by time. All winter, it stood bare and black, silently enduring the cutting winds. But the monks said that when spring came, that tree would burst into a blazing pink fire, transforming the cold gray courtyard into a radiant scene like a fairyland. The boy had never seen it bloom. The year he first arrived, the blossoms had already fallen, leaving only faded petals scattered across the bricks. From that moment, he dreamed of seeing the tree in full bloom, and in his tender imagination, the day it bloomed would be the day. All weariness vanished. The day the courtyard became magical. The day everyone's hearts grew gentle. So, as winter withdrew, the ground still frozen, the wind still sharp as knives, he would stand long beneath the tree, staring at its bare branches. Each morning, while sweeping, he would glance up, hoping to see a tiny pink bud peeking from the gray twigs. But there was nothing, only the dry rustle of wind through empty branches like a sigh. One noon, while everyone was in the meditation hall, he lingered under the tree, whispering as if pleading, "Please bloom soon." From that day, he began trying everything to help it bloom faster. He carefully wrapped warm cloth around the branches as if to comfort them. He fetched warm water from the kitchen, pouring it gently around the roots as though it were magic spring medicine. He built small wooden windshields around it at night, and each morning inspected every bud, hoping to see them swell even a little. But day after day, the peach tree remained bare, like a silent old man, asleep unmoved by the boy's hurried efforts. He grew restless. One evening, as golden sunset dusted the roof tiles, he dared to touch the tiny forming buds, trying to coax them open with his fingers, as if a single touch could make them explode into color. But the buds stayed closed, cold beneath his trembling fingertips, That night, he could not sleep. His mind was filled with those barren branches and the fear that spring would never come unless he forced it. He imagined the temple's spring festival lanterns strung up, villagers arriving, laughter filling the air, everyone marveling at the tree in full bloom. And his heart sank because the blossoms had not come, and maybe the dream never would. Then, one morning, when sunlight finally broke through, he sat slumped under the tree. The warm cloths were faded with dew, the windshields sagged in the mud. His small hands clenched, then fell limp on his knees. Just then the master walked into the courtyard. His brown robe glowed softly in the sunlight, resting on the silver strands around his ears. He said nothing. He simply sat down beside the boy, looking up at the bare branches, stretching quietly into the clear sky. They sat a long time, hearing only sparrows chirping in the eaves and the gentle smell of damp earth rising. Finally, the master spoke slowly like wind passing through leaves. "You cannot bring spring faster by pulling on the petals." The boy looked up in surprise. The words were soft as a breath, yet they sank into his heart, like water into dry soil. His eyes shimmered as if touching a truth he had never known. He turned back to the tree. Suddenly he found it funny how he had believed that trying harder could bring spring sooner. But spring does not come from impatience. Spring comes when the ground is warm enough, when the wind changes, when time has finished writing winter. The little buds don't need to be pulled open. They only need to be trusted, to be waited for, to be loved in silence. The master stayed still, eyes gazing far away, as if seeing a deeper, longer spring, not on branches, but inside the hearts of those who know how to wait. The next morning, the boy stopped wrapping cloths, stopped pouring warm water, stopped blocking the wind. He simply swept the courtyard, then sat under the tree, listening to birdsong with his eyes closed, letting the first spring sunlight touch his cheek. And then, one morning later, while sweeping the last dry leaves, something miraculous happened. On the bare branches, tiny pink specks had appeared, trembling in the dawn like little sparks of fire. The boy stood still for a long time. No cheering in his heart now, only a quiet awe spreading through his chest, as if spring had not only come to the courtyard, but also into his own heart. There is something subtle, yet deeply true, quietly flowing into our lives. We cannot bring spring by pulling on the petals. This era makes everything move at lightning speed. Meals arrive in minutes. Videos flash by in seconds. A few clicks and you can fly anywhere. And without noticing, our minds start assuming everything in life should come that fast, even growth, even success, even our deepest dreams. So when we see someone already in full bloom, admired and accomplished, we get uneasy. We look at our own slow first steps and doubt creeps in. Am I falling behind? Is something wrong with me? But peach blossoms don't open when you tug on them. And humans can't bloom by force. Every flower has its season. So does every soul, its own pace of growth, its own time to bloom, shaped by struggles, stumbles, and quiet seed-planting days. What you need is not to rush after others, but to patiently nurture yourself, so that when your time comes, you can bloom in your own radiant way, not from racing, but because you've ripened from within. Look deeper at the peach tree. All winter, it seemed dead bare, gray, leafless. Yet inside sap was quietly rising into the tips of every branch. tiny drops of life accumulating, preparing for the day of bursting open. No one saw it, no one praised it. But that silent time was when the tree was truly growing. We are the same. There are seasons when you feel stuck, no milestones, no progress. But really, you're gathering what matters most: patience, resilience, the ability to endure hardship, the inner strength to rise one day in full bloom. The Buddha said, "Drop by drop the jar fills." Each small, quiet effort is a drop filling the jar of your heart. They may not sparkle, but they are the firmest roots that keep you standing when storms come. Rush too soon, and if you try to bloom without enough life sap inside, you'll wither quickly. I've seen many climb fast to the peak of success, only to collapse at the top because they never grew roots. Do you live like that? Always running, always rushing, always feeling behind? If so, pause, because a tree blooms not from speed, but from having stood still long enough to grow deep roots. Ask yourself, why must I bloom at the same time as everyone else who decided people must succeed at 25 or 30 or 40? No one. These ages are just invisible molds society drew, and we squeeze ourselves into them, even if our souls are cracking under the weight. Have you truly watched a forest? Every tree has its season. Some bloom in early spring when frost still clings to the twigs. Some sprout in blazing summer. Some flower only in late autumn, slowly, quietly, yet still beautiful. No one scolds a tree for blooming late. No one forces them to bloom together. Because when their time comes, each one is still fragrant, still dazzling, still part of the great tapestry of the earth. And so are you. You have your own season, not early, not late, just yours. But to reach it, you need patience. You must stop comparing, because every time you compare, you're uprooting yourself to peek at the soil next door, and no tree grows by being uprooted every day. Instead of racing, quietly nurture, because when your time comes, you'll bloom in your own way, needing to be like no one else. Rushing won't get you there faster. It only exhausts you. You can burn yourself out chasing quick success, pushing, forcing, demanding constant results. But that kind of shine never lasts because it has no roots. Like a flower forced to open early, it might impress for a moment, but it will be the first to fall while the others are still full of life. In modern life, we forget that true progress isn't about speed, but endurance. Fast walkers impress at first, but steady walkers cross the distance. So if you feel slow today, do not fear. Slow does not mean failing. Slow can mean you're walking at the pace of your soul, a sustainable rhythm that can carry you far without draining your health, your peace, or your spirit. And sometimes slow walkers arrive first, not in time, but because they still have strength left to enjoy the scenery. You may think, if I don't push, don't force, don't go faster, I'll be left behind. I understand that fear. The world shouts that you must be quick, must be ahead. Everywhere reminds you time is ticking. Someone has already made it at 25. Someone is 10 steps ahead. So you clutch each second tightly, afraid. If you loosen your grip, life will slip away. But think, if your whole life is a race, are you ever really living the moment you're in? Do you still hear the wind in your hair, taste the tea on your tongue, see the pale sun on your hand? We weren't born just to reach a finish line. We were born to grow day by day, step by step, like petals slowly opening. And like all blossoms, growth needs time. It needs stillness. It needs quiet nurturing from within, not force from outside. So let me tell you sincerely, don't force the timing. Trust the process. When you plant a seed, you don't stand over it yelling, "Grow faster." You water it. Pull the weeds, clear the soil. Wait for the sun, and trust that if you care well, it will sprout in its time. Your life is the same. You don't need to pull on the petals. You just need to feed the roots. Maybe you are in the winter of your life now, cold, bare, seemingly lifeless. But remember, spring has not vanished. It is quietly forming inside you. And one day, when you least expect it, you will look back and see you have bloomed. Not loudly, not hastily, but quietly and brilliantly. You don't need to be faster than anyone. You don't need to be like anyone. You only need to be honest with your own process, patient, caring each day, without forcing, without rushing. Because flowers are only truly beautiful when they bloom in their season. And so are you. Let your spring come in its time. Because when it does, it will burst forth steady, radiant, and unstoppable. Imagine a summer morning when the sun has just risen over a field of ripe rice. Drops of night dew still cling to the tips of the leaves, sparkling like tiny pearls. A light breeze passes over and makes the whole field ripple like waves. The heavy rice heads bow in humble posture, golden as honey in the early light. The scene is so beautiful that simply standing still to look is enough to taste fulfillment, as if heaven and earth were breathing out a peaceful sigh. But to have such a harvest, there were countless quiet months before it, sowing seeds, weeding, bringing in water, fighting pests, fertilizing, watching the rain. And most important of all, the farmer never harvests when the rice is still green. Because though young rice has panicles, its grains are bland, not fragrant, not firm. Harvesting early leaves only empty grains and a field full of regret. That morning, dew still clung like fine silk along the dikes, and the dirt path to the fields looked as if someone had sprinkled a layer of silver light over it. Sparrows burst from the bamboo hedge, drawing small arcs against the pale sky. In the distance, mountains peeked through clouds like a sleeping giant. The group of novices walked quietly behind the Zen master. Their sandals touched the earth in very soft rhythms, like the whisper of early morning. The fields were a strange shade of green that day. Not as dark as a forest, not as tender as new leaves, but the sturdy green of rice in the milky stage. Each plot lay beside another, like rugs, their seams the shimmering channels that reflected the sky above. The wind blew, the rice ripples trembled, and the whole field heaved like a small sea. The rice had headed the grains still soft, a faint, milky scent, only noticeable if you bent close. A young disciple, the smallest of the group, walked along wide-eyed with curiosity. Everything was new to him. Frogs croaking in the distance, a plow laid on the bank, even the soft rustle of the monks' robes keeping time with their steps. Each time the wind swept by, he lifted his hands to catch it, as if to bring a little of the countryside smell back to the temple yard. When the group stopped by a paddy, he couldn't contain his excitement. Pointing at the curved panicles, he blurted out, "Master, the rice has headed already. Why don't we harvest now before the birds eat it?" The Zen master smiled the smile of someone who has lived through many harvests, neither fast nor slow, warm like the morning sun. He didn't answer right away. He stepped down to the field bank, scooped a little mud into both hands, inhaled it gently, Then let it fall back, returning to the earth. What belongs to the earth? Then he pinched off one grain, rolled it lightly between his fingertips. A milky white drop oozed out, because if you harvest while it's still green, you will never know what ripe rice tastes like. The novice's eyes widened. The answer was simple, but it opened something deeper, like a door cracking open in a light breeze. He fell silent, yet inside him, questions lined up one after another, like bamboo leaves. If we wait, what if the birds eat it? If we wait, could a storm roll in? If we harvest a bit early, wouldn't we worry less? Those small anxieties crowded together like thin clouds gathering at a mountaintop. The Zen master sat on the field bank, eyes following a damselfly landing on a rice blade. He spread his hand, inviting the novices to sit in a circle on the damp grass. Cool gusts drifted by and set the edges of everyone's robes swaying. Far off, farmers called to one another. Water flowed into a paddy through a small spillway, murmuring like background music for an outdoor lesson. "Taste it," he said, offering the milky grain still on his hand to the youngest. "Tell me what it tastes like." The boy, a bit shy, touched the grain to his lips. A bland milkiness, slightly sticky with a hint of the mud's earthy tang. He frowned and shook his head. Bland. Not fragrant like the rice in the kitchen. Yes. The master nodded, because it hasn't reached its time. He slowly traced a circle in the dirt with a dry straw left from the last crop. Rice has its season. The sky has its season. The human heart has its season. If you harvest early, what you bring home will be empty grains. If you demand a flower to bloom early, it will be the first to fall. The boy watched the circle in the dirt and felt the scattered stories inside him begin to connect. Suddenly, he remembered all the times he had rushed, hurrying through a verse to make chanting on time, rushing to finish a task just to be praised, hurrying to find an answer before understanding the question. The result was always the same: things came and went as quickly as a noon sunbeam across the brick courtyard. The wind rose again. Sparrows that had perched on a power line suddenly swooped down over the field like tiny black dots. They fluttered and chirped, jostling one another. The boy jumped up. "Master, the birds will eat it all." The master raised his hand light as smoothing a ripple on water. Birds only eat the bird's share. The field still keeps the people's share. Don't trade the whole season because you're afraid of losing a few grains. He looked over the fields and his voice deepened. "Do you hear it?" He tilted his head. The grain is speaking very softly. It says, "Let me ripen. If you pull me from my season, I will go home with you in the form of an empty grain." Farmers passed by, hats, low shoulders, balancing wooden buckets, laughing as they walked. One stopped, glanced at the brown-robed group sitting on the bank, and nodded kindly. He mused, "If you harvest green rice, the cooked rice won't be sticky, the wine won't be sweet, and the dried grain won't harden, no matter how long you heat it." The master returned the greeting with a gentle smile. "You've taught half our lesson for the youngsters." The farmer went on, leaving behind the scent of dry grass and new sun. The boy tugged at the master's robe hem and whispered, afraid to break the stillness. "But if we wait, what if a storm comes? If you wait the right way, you'll know when to harvest." Waiting is not sitting still. Waiting is watching the clouds, listening to the wind, feeling the rice stalks, smelling the milk change into a deeper fragrance. Waiting is the work of someone who loves the season, not someone who is afraid. He plucked a rice blade and placed it in the boy's hand. Here, keep this. Each morning when you pass by, taste one grain. One day, you'll know it's time. On that day, you won't need to ask me. The group continued along the field bank. The master walked slowly now and then, bending to pick up a tiny empty shell, pointing out signs few people notice where the water had just receded, exposing darker mud. Little bird tracks shaped like forks. One rice panicle bending heavier than the others. All of it was letters in the book of the fields. Near the end of the bank, a small fiddler crab scuttled across its bright red claws like two tiny flames. The boy laughed, forgetting his earlier question. But when he turned back to the fields, he suddenly saw them differently no longer. A flat, monotonous green, but a living body breathing, growing slowly, moving toward a new season. That day passed like that. At noon, the sun beat down on the temple roof, and the wind from the fields carried the smell of straw. In the afternoon, clouds sank low. Birds returned from the mountain clefts, drawing fine ink lines across the sky. The boy set the rice blade in the corner of his desk and looked at it like a promise. See you on the day of ripeness. In the days that followed, he kept the habit. Early each morning he went to the fields, bent down, picked a grain, and tasted it slowly. At first, it was still bland with a faint, milky astringency. A few days later, sweetness began to touch his tongue. A few days after that, the grain felt firmer, the fragrance clearer. Each small change was a quiet joy, like hearing someone tap a very soft beat behind a wall. One morning, the clouds were high and thin like silk, the breeze gentle, and the paddies mirrored the sky in pale blue squares. The boy tasted a grain and stopped. No more grassy milk. Instead, a deep, warm ripeness, like a kitchen simmering a fresh pot of rice. He said nothing, just lifted his face toward the temple veranda where the master was brewing tea. Their eyes met from afar. The master nodded very slightly, confirming something both already knew. Harvest came. Sickles flashed under the sun. Each cut was clean, decisive. Bundles of ripe rice were gathered and stacked. The fields shifted from green to gold, then to a warm straw hue. Farmers' laughter, children running, hens clucking, all blended into the music of a plentiful season. That evening at dinner, the first pot of new rice was brought out. The grains were round, sticky, fragrant. Steam rose, mingling the scents of straw and hearth ash. The boy took a spoonful and chewed slowly. Each grain opened in his mouth, sweet, soft, with a faint hint of the fields. The master's words echoed in his mind no longer as text, but as taste. If you harvest while it's still green, you will never know what ripe rice tastes like. Night fell, the moon rose. The temple courtyard was so quiet, you could hear the bamboo leaves tapping one another. The boy sat on the steps, the dried rice blade tucked between 2 pages of his study book. Suddenly, he thought of all the times he had harvested green, rushing to conclusions, before listening, fully reaching for praise, before finishing good work, grasping at the destination before learning the whole path. They were all the same, a moment's false comfort, followed by a long emptiness, like a beautiful bundle of rice that is hollow inside. The master stepped out, holding a steaming teacup. He sat beside the boy without speaking. After a while, he asked softly, "What did you taste today?" "I tasted the season," the boy whispered with a smile. "Yes, the season has its own flavor. People do too. When the time comes, fragrance arises on its own." He looked up at the moon. "The hardest thing isn't rushing forward. The hardest thing is knowing when to stop and waiting until the rice is ripe." A light breeze carried the scent of new rice from the distant fields, thin as a thread of smoke. In that moment, the boy wanted to keep that fragrance for a long time, as if storing a lesson deep in his chest. Then he relaxed. He understood that keeping is not clutching. Keeping is knowing how to return at the right time, the right season, and meet it again in another form, humbler, deeper. The next morning, the group walked past the fields again. Stubble shimmered with dew, and the sky opened wide and blue. The ground still held footprints from the season just gone by. The boy looked at the fields now and saw they were not empty at all. Those short stubble clumps were promises of the next season. In the earth below, there must already be tiny songs preparing for a new cycle. At the same bank as before, he sat down on his own. Without waiting to be asked, he said, "I saw the birds eat, but there was still enough rice. I heard the wind push the clouds toward the mountains and knew the rain would come and also knew it would pass. I tasted a grain each day until it no longer tasted of milk." The master nodded, eyes fixed on the field. "You have learned the lesson of waiting." "Yes." The boy hesitated, waiting without standing still. "Right. Waiting while still doing your part, tending, watching, listening. That is enough." The group stood and moved on. The same old dirt road seemed wider. Ox cart ruts had dried and set into parallel lines like two ruled guides showing the way home. Little white butterflies fluttered alongside the brown robes for a while and then drifted out over the paddies. Everything was quiet and natural, needing no urging. That evening, the boy placed the dried rice blade on the ancestral altar beside a Bodhi sprig. A candle flame flickered and cast its shadow on the wall, a thin curve, simple yet proud. Hands folded, he silently thanked the season and the lesson. From now on, whenever his heart grew impatient to harvest early, he would remember the scent of that first pot of rice. Remember the grassy milk turned to deep fragrance, and remember only when ripe can the grain tell its full story. Night deepened. Wind moved along the veranda. The temple drum for the night watch sounded in steady beats. Out in the fields, perhaps the stubble whispered egrets tucked their heads beneath their wings, and newly planted seedlings dreamed of the day they would stand firm in the wind. The universe runs on breaths long and short woven together. Nothing is forgotten. No season is in a hurry. Only people are prone to haste, and that seemingly simple line from the morning by the field. Because if you harvest while it's still green, you will never know what ripe rice tastes like, became a red thread woven through the smallest things in life. Finishing a book before judging it, mastering a skill before teaching it, loving someone with the patience to nurture. Everything has its season. Every season needs time. The next morning, the sun rose again at the familiar horizon. The dew thinned. On the path to the fields, fresh footprints pressed beside the old. The brown-robed line walked on unhurried. The sky was so blue it felt like touching it would leave a drop of color on your fingers. And somewhere in that sky, surely a very gentle smile was blooming, not rushed, not hurried, like a rice panicle ripening in its season. Lasting results do not come from speed. Lasting results only come from natural ripening. Yet in modern life, we often forget this simple truth. Everything around us seems to race achievements announced non-stop success metrics, loudly displayed on social media stories of getting rich before 30 trumpeted everywhere. And in that whirlwind, you start to feel left behind. You feel pressured to succeed early, to achieve before 30, to outpace others as quickly as possible. You look around, and it seems everyone already has their harvest, a solid career, a peaceful family, travel everywhere, a house, a car. While you still stand in a lush green field, your grain's only just beginning to bend with no gold in sight. And then you grow impatient. You want to harvest early. You want to pick fruit while it's still green, just so you won't be left behind. But pause for a moment and ask yourself, if you rush to harvest before the grain is ripe, do you actually bring home anything? Or do you carry back only hollow bundles and empty grains, and a weary, depleted spirit burned up in the effort to force what isn't ready? True growth is never a race. It's a quiet process, accumulating little by little today, learning a skill tomorrow, standing a bit firmer, getting up after each stumble with a more resilient heart. That is the foundation for a truly golden harvest, one that doesn't appear and vanish, but stays in your life for a long time. Growth is like rice. If you want fragrance, you must let it ripen with time, sun, rain, and patient daily care. No one can force a rice plant to ripen in a few nights. And no one can force a person to mature in a few months. Yet in our hurried modern world, many try to do the impossible. They throw themselves into work with all their strength, take on project after project work. Late into the night, drink coffee. Instead of eating, don't dare rest a single day, because they believe that if they stop, they'll be left behind. And what happens? They burn out, they lose their fire, and in the end, they have no strength left to reach their own harvest. Have you ever done that? Burned yourself to run faster, only to arrive with nothing in your hands, just a frayed mind, an exhausted body, and a withered belief. Understand this, laboring too hard, too soon will drain you before you can reap. You might sow quickly and tend diligently, but if you don't know how to rest, how to wait, how to let time do its part, you will only scorch yourself in the drought. Like an oil lamp turned up too high, the flame flares bright, but dies fast because the oil hasn't had time to soak the wick. Farmers know this well. They cannot stand in the field and yank each young panicle to make it grow faster. They quietly water weed, remove pests, then return to the porch to wait for sun, for wind, for enough rain. Because they understand ripening is a process, not a command. The Buddha taught all phenomena arise due to causes and conditions. When conditions are sufficient, the fruit appears. You cannot force the fruit before the causes have matured. You cannot make a lamp brighter by burning the wick faster. You only run out of oil sooner. So if you are on your own path, remember, you don't need to mature faster than anyone. You don't need to succeed before some deadline. You only need to keep cultivating each day, live true to your own rhythm, and let time do the work that only time can do. When you are ripe enough, results will appear on their own, solid, fragrant, lasting, beyond anyone's ability to take away. And most important, something many people miss along the way. Enjoy the journey instead of staring only at the destination. Have you noticed? The months when the rice is still green before it bends heavy are when farmers feel most deeply the meaning of their work. That's when they stand in the field, breathe in the earthy scent, hear the wind rustle through each blade, and watch every stalk grow a little each day. That's when they smile at the sight of new panicles forming, when a small bird perches and the whole plot trembles gently, or when the first rains fall and the earth releases a soft, sweet aroma. If they only counted the days to harvest, they would miss it all, those small but precious moments, the quiet drops of happiness that gather on every green panicle. And so will you. If you only look at success, you will miss your own life unfolding day by day. You won't see how strong you've become through small challenges that seemed trivial. You won't notice how much you've improved through steady, quiet steps. You won't savor the ordinary yet priceless moments, a calm morning, a hot cup of tea, a loved one's smile, because your mind is always running towards some imagined harvest day. Are you sure that when that day comes, you'll still have the strength to enjoy it? Are you sure that in racing, you haven't lost the capacity to feel joy along the way? Life keeps urging you to be quick, to be great, to outdo others. But the rice plant doesn't care. It doesn't compete with the plants beside it. It doesn't fret because it hasn't headed like the next field. It simply grows in its own rhythm, taking in nutrients by day, receiving dew in silence by night. And one day, it bows golden in the morning sun, without competing, without surpassing anyone, simply because it has ripened. You can be like that. You don't need to be faster than anyone. You just need to be a little steadier than yesterday. And most of all, you must be patient enough to wait for your own season of ripeness. Only when you are truly ripe will your grain be truly fragrant, not because others approve, but because you know you have lived each day fully missing nothing on the way there. Pause for a moment and look deeply at your journey right now. What stage is your life field in, just sprouting tender but full of life, vibrant green channeling sap into every leaf, or beginning to head, preparing to offer its first fragrant grains? Wherever you are, remember this. Don't harvest early. Don't push yourself just because others are in their harvest season. Each person has a season, just as each plot has its own growth rhythm. If you try to harvest before your grain is ripe, what you bring home won't be true results, but hollow bundles and a tired, depleted spirit. You will never know the exquisite flavor of ripe grains you yourself have tended, a flavor that only comes after sun, rain, wind, and months of quiet care. And then when your season truly arrives, you will stand in the golden field, hear the rice sing in the wind, and smile with relief. Finally, it was worth it. Lasting results never come from speed, they come from natural ripening. So allow yourself to slow down. Let each day be a drop of sun, a drop of rain, a cool breeze, nurturing the field within your heart. Don't let the pressure of comparison turn you into someone who only runs and never enjoys the beauty of the path. And when your time comes, you won't need to fight anyone, because your harvest will arrive bright, abundant, and enduring. Trust this. When you let your life ripen in its natural rhythm, what you gain won't just be success to show the world, but true peace within the most precious reward no race can ever bring. Imagine a small stream winding through an ancient forest, murmuring day after day, like a wordless song, softly singing lullabies each night to moss-covered roots. The water is so clear, you can see every pebble on the bottom, every dry leaf drifting slowly as if unwilling to go far. That stream was once where birds gathered every morning chirping as they bathed in the cool water, where the village children played, their laughter ringing like wind chimes, where travelers stopped at midday in the summer heat to wash their faces and sigh with relief as the clear water slid over their burning cheeks. The stream was like a quiet lifeline, gently nourishing the whole forest. Then the dry season arrived. The air went still. The sun hung overhead like a red-hot coal, pouring heat onto every leaf and stone. Leaves crackled underfoot. The earth split with fine cracks. With each passing day, the stream's babbling grew quieter, slower, and then stopped altogether. The last trickles seeped down into the ground. Birds stopped returning. Children stopped coming to play. Only a bare stream bed remained, its stones darkened and split. One morning, as the first light flickered through the branches, a young novice stood silently by the dry stream. His faded cloth sandals sank slightly into the brittle, broken mud. He looked at the cracked rocks, eyes red, and his tears fell onto the parched stones, seeping into the fissures as if trying to wake the vanished water. "Has the stream died, Master?" he asked hoarsely, his voice breaking like the dry leaves falling into the empty bed. The Zen master stood beside him, his dark brown robe damp with night dew, his gentle eyes gazing down into the silent channel. He did not answer at once. A light morning breeze lifted a few fine grains of dust. Then he spoke slowly, his voice as soft as an underground spring. "The stream is not dead. It is only resting, preparing for a new flow." The novice looked up, tears still wet, following each measured word as it fell into the quiet. In that moment, the forest seemed to grow still to listen, and somewhere deep beneath that dry earth, there seemed to be a whisper, a promise that the rains would return. You know that sentence sounds very simple, but in life, it is a profoundly meaningful reminder. Dryness is not the end. Dryness is a pause for renewal. There are seasons everyone passes through, mornings when you wake and feel only a vast emptiness. No new ideas, no interest in what once stirred your heart, not a drop of motivation to keep going. Work you used to love becomes heavy dreams. You cradled seem to crumble in your hands. Each day feels like a faded copy of the last. People try, but have no strength left to try. And in that exhaustion, a question begins to creep in. Am I broken? Do I have any value left? Yet that is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that someone is walking through their own dry season. Like the stream, the water has not disappeared. It is quietly sinking down, soaking into the earth to recover, to gather strength, to prepare for a fresh surge. Emptiness is not a period, it is a comma, a breath of the soul before a new cycle begins. The problem is that in modern life, we're taught we must always be strong, always move forward, always be full of energy. Society praises busyness, celebrates those who never rest, never slow down. So when people fall into depletion, they're afraid to admit it. They feel ashamed. They hide their fatigue, put on a forced smile, pretend they're fine while inside they wither by the day. But the truth is, even nature needs empty seasons. After harvest, the field must rest. After a season of blossoms, trees must shed their leaves to draw sap back to their roots. A stream needs time to dry so the bed can settle and underground water can gather again. The Buddha taught all phenomena are impermanent. Everything has a beginning, a peak, a decline, and then arises again. Depletion is not failure. It is an essential part of life's cycle. Without the times of quieting, how could enough strength be gathered for the next rise? So when you enter days of dryness, what's needed is not to condemn yourself as weak, but to allow yourself to rest, to be still, to breathe. Not to give up, but to be reborn. Because like the stream, when the underground source is full again, the water will rise on its own, clearer, stronger, and more abundant than before. Look at the forests at the end of winter. For months, trees stand in silence. No leaves, no flowers, no fruit. Outwardly they seem dead. Inwardly they are drawing sap to the roots, gathering energy, quietly preparing for a new surge. No one urges a tree to bloom in winter, because everyone knows that without that season of dormancy, spring cannot come. Look at the earth. After each harvest, farmers don't sow immediately. They till the soil, then let it rest and recover. If they force the land to work without pause, it will become depleted, hardened, unable to give life. The soil needs time to renew its fertility, to replace what was lost. Without a fallow season, there can be no future harvest. People are the same. If we never stop, if we don't give the soul a season of rest, we lose the capacity to revive. The body wears out the mind, grows weary, passion cools, yet many fail to recognize this as a signal to pause. They treat it as proof of failure. And so begins a war against oneself, pushing harder, doing more, trying to prove that one still has worth. But the more you fight the dryness, the more exhausted you become. It's like trying to squeeze the last drops from a stream that has already run dry. You only chip the rocks and draw no water. Resistance doesn't create strength. It erodes the little you have left. Many keep running, not because they still have drive, but because they fear others will think they've fallen behind. They do more, not from interest, but to hide the truth that inside they're drained. Meanwhile, nature has never treated rest as weakness. Forests have seasons of bare branches to nourish the roots. The land has seasons without cultivation. The sea has low tide, rivers have dry seasons. The moon has nights of waning. Those empty spaces don't diminish their value. They are precisely what allows life to continue. Rest is not failure. Rest is regeneration. Like the dry stream, even without water, it is still part of the greater flow. Its task now is not to keep running, but to pause and gather the aquifers to prepare for what comes next, returning stronger. You don't have to be overflowing and brimming with energy all the time. The truth is, no one can sustain that. What matters is being honest about your state. This is a time of dryness, and I need rest. That seemingly small admission is the starting point of renewal. Only when you stop pretending you're fine can you begin to care for what is tired. Rest to regenerate, not to avoid. Pause not to quit, but to step forward more surely. Just as trees need winter soil, needs fallow time, and streams need stillness, people need periods of rest to continue a long journey. And when the new season comes, what seemed depleted will rise again, greener and stronger than before. There is one crucial truth to engrave deeply: never measure your worth by a temporary season. A drought does not define the value of a stream, nor can a stretch of dryness define an entire human life. Today may be an empty time, lost, exhausted, uninterested in anything. That does not mean you're useless or a failure. It only means you are in the middle of a dry cycle to be followed by a cycle of renewal. Don't rush to stamp failure on yourself just because you're paused. A field left fallow is not wasted land. It is land recovering quietly, gathering nutrients, so that one day it will yield a better harvest. In agriculture, this is called letting the land rest, planting nothing for a season, so the soil can regenerate and return richer and more abundant in the next. The human soul needs rests like that too. The Buddha taught, all phenomena are impermanent. Where there is arising, there is ceasing, and where there is ceasing, there is arising. A dry stretch is not an ending. It is part of a cycle of transformation. Without silence, how could you hear the source beginning to flow again from deep within? Right now, fear may be lurking that if you stop, others will pass you by. But the truth is this: if you don't stop to recover, you won't be able to go far. Rest does not make you fall behind. It gives you the strength to continue. Like a traveler who stops beneath a tree to breathe, not to abandon the road, but to go farther. You don't need to run without stopping. You only need to learn when to pause. Those timely pauses will save you from burnout, from losing the light in your eyes. Maybe this is the drought season of your heart. Everything around you feels dry, empty, meaningless. The joy you felt for what you loved has vanished, and the light that once guided you seems out. But the truth is, the light is not gone. It has only quieted so you can see the darkness clearly, and then choose to step back into the light by your own will. A dry season is not a period. It is a comma, a brief breath to step back to see the whole path and to recognize what truly matters. And when you have recovered, the stream within you will rise again, clear, strong, and unstoppable. Give yourself permission to rest. Let your heart be quiet for a while. Not to surrender, but to prepare. Because after every drought, streams return, stronger, purer, fuller. When they do, the water doesn't just flow, it carries the resonance of months spent gathering underground. People are the same after each dry spell. If they pause, recover, and refuse to judge themselves, they return with a new inner strength, steadier and deeper. Yet society today often makes people forget this. We're taught to keep advancing, to always be busy, to constantly produce results, as if a human life could be measured by output alone. So when exhaustion comes, people panic thinking everything has collapsed, believing they've lost it all. But that's not the truth. A dried stream has not vanished. It has quietly withdrawn, threading through stones, soaking into the earth to refill hidden sources. Likewise, quiet periods are not wasted time. They are times of storing energy, opportunities to reflect, reorganize, and heal the inner fractures that busy routines make us neglect. The Buddha taught that everything is impermanent, arising and ceasing, flourishing and fading. The rains cannot come if the earth hasn't cracked to open pathways for new water. Renewal cannot arrive if we don't allow ourselves to stop and recover. Rest, therefore, is not weakness. It is an essential part of growing up. So if one day your heart feels like a cracked, empty streambed, don't be afraid. Nothing is lost. You are only pausing, preparing for your own new current. And when the first rains return, when the first drops begin to slip into the crevices and wake each hidden vein, you will realize the water will not only flow, it will sing. And that song not of haste, but of life reborn from days that seemed utterly spent, will be yours. Have you ever thought that true strength means standing firm like a rock, unmoving, unshaken. No matter how the storms rise, many people grow up believing that as long as they're always steadfast, always tough, never changing in the face of anything, they'll be safe, they'll never break. But sometimes that very immobility makes a soul grow weary like a dry branch with no life left in it. So pause for a beat, to listen to a story that may change what strength has meant in your mind all this time. Back then, the courtyard of an old temple lay in the middle of a valley, its moss-covered walls soft as a blanket, the bell sounding morning and evening, all the way to the bamboo hedges at the edge of the village. In the middle of the yard stood an ancient tree that had withstood sun and rain for more than 100 years. Its base bulged like a boulder that 4 people couldn't wrap their arms around. Roots snaked up through the ground into natural steps where children often sat to tie strings to their pinwheels. Its canopy spread wide, shading a corner of the courtyard, its dappled leaves scattering over the brick floor like sunlight through a thin curtain. At midday in summer, the sun poured down like fire and hot wind spilled from the western slope. Yet stepping into the tree's shade, the stifling heat seemed pushed aside. Village children would flock there to lie on the grass, listening to cicadas humming like honey eyes, half closed at the bands of light swaying high in the deep green leaves. The abbot's prayer beads clicked in the main hall, now far, now near, blending with the soft touch of leaves into a quiet summer symphony. Come, autumn yellow leaves began to fall. They spun like little butterflies and touched the ground lightly. After a single night of dry wind, a soft honey-colored carpet covered the courtyard, crunching underfoot. Red-whiskered bulbuls perched on the highest branches, welcoming the day with crystal-clear songs. The tree looked still, but keen eyes could see brown grain showing through tiny cracks, time engraving its name on the trunk with invisible ink. The tree stood there like a defiant emblem of time. Villagers told one another, no matter how fierce the storm, if you press close under its crown, you're safe. An elder said he once hid from soldiers under its roots long ago. A pair of lovers leaned against it the day they asked the monk to bless their union, carving their initials into the smooth bark like a vow. The tree was a milestone for measuring the village's age. When this root bulge rose another hand's breadth, another summer had passed. Then one night, a tempest blew in from the sea. Evening fell suddenly. Birds called to each other, scrambling for shelter, and the sky bunched into gray sheets. The first wind only ruffled the lotus pond behind the temple, but soon it shrieked like a long howl through the bamboo grove. The abbot sent novices to bolt the doors, bring jars and pots in from the yard, and tie the banners on the bell tower. Lightning tore the sky, sketching jagged lines over the roof like roots. Thunder chased itself in rolling waves, echoes booming from mountain to mountain like a herd of buffalo running. The ancient tree stood in the center trunk, straight as a spear. The wind knocked its canopy sideways, then yanked it back. New leaves rattled. Small branches snapped with sharp pops. People saw the trunk tremble like a giant bracing through force. Rain slammed down, suddenly drumming on stone, sliding along the trunk in dark, shining streaks before foaming at the roots. The wind grew wilder. It found every crack, howled through the tiles, then hurled its force straight into the crown. A branch as thick as a calf's leg cracked with a snap, crashing onto the bamboo fence and breaking a corner of it. Lightning struck near the tower. The world flashed white for an instant, then sank into dense black. Amid the roaring wind came a low sound from the trunk wood grain, compressing, groaning under an invisible pressure. The night dragged on as if it wouldn't end. Everyone lay listening to the storm drive through, frightened and praying the temple roof would hold. Toward the fourth watch, the wind shifted, flinging the sheets of rain toward the mountain. A dry, sickening split rang out crash. The ground shivered. The novices startled awake. The abbot quietly lit an oil lamp, glanced out at the yard, then lowered his eyes as if knowing what had happened and unable to stop it. By morning, the rain cleared as if not a drop had fallen. The sky opened blue and clear clouds thin as scarves floating. Damp earth exhaled a scent of crushed leaves and fresh-cut wood. When the temple doors swung open, only the stump remained in the yard, a dark ring of bark cutting the trunk like a giant bowl sawn in two. The great proud trunk lay sprawled along the path, bark gouged and jagged, its dense age rings exposed like the ripples of time. Thick sap oozed from the split black ants scurried around it, and a few green leaves still trembled, clinging to broken branches. The whole village was stunned. Elders came with canes and stood in silence. Children ran up, blurted questions, then fell quiet at the sight. Someone touched the fallen wood and felt warmth still there. Sighs replaced words. A fine dust of bark rose when the sun hit it, sparkling like the ash of a fire just gone out. One child, the boy who had carved his and his friend's initials into the trunk the year before, touched the broken halves of his letters, eyes welling. He turned to the old monk beside him, bewildered and pained. "Master, why did such a big, strong tree break?" The monk didn't answer right away. He bent to pick a yellow leaf caught on his brown robe and brushed away the night's rain. His gaze lingered on the gaping split, the tight, straight grain inside running like a swarm of arrows in one direction. With the eye of someone who had lived beside the tree for decades, he saw clearly. In that trunk, there were hardly any soft spirals or eyes, where the grain had learned to curve the marks of times it had bowed to the wind. The tree was used to standing upright, resisting bracing so much that it forgot how to bend. He looked up and touched the cut face. The old warm hand could read the story in rings thick as pages. He answered gently, his voice like a fine blade slicing through the fog in their hearts because it was too rigid to know how to bend. The boy's eyes widened. The answer dropped like a pebble onto water, crisp and clean, and the ripples spread silently outward. Within the break, the dark rings showed like a map of time, each ring a season of sun and rain, each mark a trace of hardship past. The tree had lived straight and proud, refusing to sway to any wind until last night. Men from the village began sawing the trunk into sections to clear the path. The saws screeched, and the smell of fresh wood and sap rose thick and sweet. Each time the blade crossed a knot where a branch once grew, the sound changed rougher, heavier. An old woman brought sticky rice and green tea to the workers, set the tray by the stump, and reached out to stroke the rough surface like smoothing the hair of someone who has just fallen asleep. Homeless birds perched on the roof tiles, looking down as if confused. Novices swept leaves and gathered branches, pausing now and then to glance at the stump. their eyes a mix of regret and curiosity. On the rain-wet bricks, the place where the trunk fell left a shallow, curved dent, like the impression of a wave breaking on shore. Someone whispered, "I thought it would never fall." By late afternoon, the sun's rays thinned, slanting across the veranda. The stump still stood steady as a great drum, its cut face showing concentric rings. The old monk had a good section of the trunk split and joined into a long bench for the porch. The roots spread like giant fingers he kept as a seat for the children. He tucked a fresh green sprig into a crack, like placing incense for an old friend. Night came insects, humming like a chorus. With no canopy, the moon shone straight into the courtyard silver, pooling in the gaps between bricks and on the smooth cut of the stump. The boy from that morning came quietly to sit back against the stump, bare feet on the roots. He pressed his ear to the wood. Maybe something still lingered. Suddenly, he heard wind through a flute, in truth air, whistling through hollow channels in the roots. But to him, it was the tree whispering, "Don't be too rigid." The next morning, a light breeze blew. In the sky, now broad where shade once fell, the young branches of the neighboring almond tree reached out as if to fill the gap. Tiny green shoots pushed up from the leftover root edge, their sharp tips pressing against old bark, eager as little fingers tugging at a blanket. The boy gasped softly. The old monk smiled, eyes warm as the morning sun. The tree was gone. The emblem of defiance had broken. But the lesson remained. It lay in the straight lightning bolt fracture, in the tight age rings strung like a taut cord, in the saw's rasp, in the sighs, in the children's laughter, and in the empty space where the leaves had been rigidity breaks. Knowing how to bend endures. From that day on, when the winds picked up, villagers still came to the temple. They no longer sought shade beneath the crown, but sat on the bench made from its wood, leaning against the veranda. The story of the stormy night was told and retold, not to mourn, but to remember. The children even changed their games. They tied ropes to the young almond branches and practiced swinging gently with the wind, laughing until they tipped over, learning to relax without letting go. Another autumn evening, the almond leaves turned color and fell in a thin layer over the dry stump. The old monk sat there, opened an old book, and his finger paused at a simple line. True strength is knowing how to bend. He closed the book and looked out over the wide yard sunlight, scattering like golden dust. At the edge of the old roots, green shoots had grown long like new letters written on a clean page. And the child's question from years before, why did such a big, strong tree break, had long had its answer. Not because the storm was too strong, but because it had forgotten how to bow. Not because fate was cruel, but because it had chosen to stand fixed in a single idea of strength for too long. That story never gets old, no matter how many times it's told. Each listener pauses for a moment, as if remembering a time they too faced the wind head on until their lips turned blue. And in the courtyard that now has more sun than before, people learn to walk slower when storms come to exhale, when the gust hits their chest to lean without breaking like slender bamboo that knows how to sway. The ancient tree fell, but in that fall, something rose, a gentle understanding more enduring than any canopy that flexibility is true strength. And at the round cut in the center of the yard, each ring still tells its story to anyone willing to sit, lay a hand on the wood, and listen with their whole heart. There's a paradox most people forget amid life's grind. Excessive rigidity is not strength. Flexibility is what helps us survive. The giant tree in the temple yard didn't fall because the storm was too fierce. It fell because it forgot how to bow to the wind. Meanwhile, the small, slender clumps of bamboo stood firm after the squall because they knew how to bend, how to sway with the wind, how to wait for the storm to pass, and then stand straight again, still green. People are the same. Many carry a hidden belief: I must be truly strong. I must be steadfast. I can't let anything shake me. It sounds right, but that belief quietly becomes a trap, because when the storm really comes, what happens if you're too rigid? You cannot pivot. You cannot adapt. And then a single overwhelming pressure is enough to break you, just as the great tree snapped in a single stormy night. Plenty of people live like that, wrapping themselves in a shell of steel, thinking it's the only way to be safe. They refuse to change, reject differing opinions, and never admit their own mistakes. But when life suddenly swerves, when crisis hits, when what seemed certain collapses, they're the first to shatter. Not because they are weak, but because they were too rigid to know how to bend. By contrast, those who survive and grow after the biggest upheavals are often the flexible ones, not because they're weak, but because they know when to step back to keep balance. They know to be quiet when the storm rises, letting the wind pass overhead instead of slamming into their face. They know how to adjust course when necessary rather than ramming their heads into a hopeless wall just to prove they're fearless. Buddhist teaching has a simple saying: adapt to conditions without losing your core. Keep your core while adapting to conditions. It means living flexibly with circumstances while keeping your inner roots. Someone who adapts doesn't flop whichever way the wind blows. They bow when the wind is strong to protect their roots and avoid breaking. Like bamboo, the more it bows in high wind, the straighter and greener it stands after the storm. In the middle of a crisis, when others panic, shout, and scatter, they keep a calm gaze and a gentle voice, not because they're unafraid, but because they understand a simple truth: resisting a storm is useless. The only way through is to bend and move with it. And when the storm passes, it's the flexible ones who rise first, still whole, even stronger than before. Flexibility doesn't diminish your value. On the contrary, it protects you so you can keep growing, keep going far, keep staying green like bamboo after every storm. Rigidity makes anything easy to break. Flexibility is what endures. Yet in modern society, many people misunderstand steadfastness. They think it means holding everything exactly the same, staying fixed like a rock in a river, no matter how the world changes around them. But steadfastness isn't stubbornness. Steadfastness is holding to your core values while adjusting your path when circumstances shift, like a boat trimming its sails to keep moving forward when the wind changes. There's a thought worth pondering. Smart people don't fight the wind. Smart people trim the sails. The wind can blow harder and change direction suddenly. Instead of resisting those who adapt, adjust their sails, change their route, and still move toward their destination without being swept away. The truth is, change frightens people not because of change itself, but because it feels like losing oneself. Change forces us to let go of the familiar, a job done for years. a lifestyle we've clung to, a relationship we thought was everything. So many choose to cling, thinking that if they just hold tight enough, the storm can't break them. But storms don't ask whether you're ready. Storms come. Understand this change isn't betraying your values. It's how you protect them. Like water, sometimes rain, sometimes river, sometimes brook, sometimes snow, sometimes ice. The form changes constantly, but the essence is always water. We're the same. We can change how we live, think, work, and love, as long as the honest core inside stays intact. One of the clearest signs of flexibility is humility. Humble people don't need to be right all the time, don't need to win every time, don't need to prove they're better than others. They can learn from anyone, admit mistakes, adjust course, start over. That's why they stand steady amid upheaval. While the proud cling to their positions, the humble are willing to move to survive. Like bamboo that bows in the wind while the great tree breaks. Life always brings sudden storms, losing a job, losing a loved one, a relationship falling apart, or simply everything veering from the plan. In those moments, clinging to the old can feel safe, but in truth it makes you more likely to snap when the storm sweeps through. Storms don't care whether you're ready. Storms come. What decides whether you can go on is not how hard you are, but whether you're willing to bend to get through. Because only what knows how to bow can stand up again after the storm. True strength isn't never falling. It's knowing when to bow so you can rise again. Like slender bamboo in a gale, when the wind roars, it doesn't resist. It bends low, sways, even presses close to the ground. And when the storm passes, it slowly straightens, still green, still reaching upward. The ancient tree, seemingly unyielding, stood proud in the temple yard for centuries and was broken in a single night of strong wind. It lies there forever, a quiet reminder, too rigid, and you break. In life, everyone passes through their own storms, sudden blows, losses, shocks that seem impossible to rise from. In those moments, what matters isn't keeping an unmoving exterior, untouched and unshaken, but granting yourself permission to soften a little. Soften to observe, to adjust, to change direction when needed. Soften so you don't break, so you still have the chance to stand again after the storm. Admitting you need to change is not weakness, it's wisdom. Only the truly strong dare release the old to receive the new. Only those steady within can be flexible without. There will be many more storms. No one can avoid them, but we can learn to pass through them without breaking, without losing ourselves, becoming deeper, steadier, lighter. Because true strength isn't in a hard exterior. It's in quiet resilience, like bamboo. Not huge, not loud, just flexible enough to move through every season of wind. And when the storm clears, what remains isn't what was hardest. It's what knew how to bend, still there, calm at ease, and still green. Have you ever on a quiet morning looked in the mirror and felt your gaze pause at the reflection? It's still the familiar face, yet something feels different. A few silver hairs glinting in the light, a few fine lines like threads at the corners of your eyes, and the look that once blazed, now softened deeper, quieter. A brief moment, but enough for a whisper to rise inside. Since when did time start passing through me so quietly like this? That afternoon, sunlight poured into the temple courtyard like liquid honey, laying warm golden bands across the old mossy stone steps. On the veranda, the old monk sat quietly like a statue carved from agar wood, the shoulders of his brown robe worn thin loose threads like the marks of time. Light slanted through the canopies of ancient trees, casting crossed leaf shadows over a face lined with age, while his eyes remained clear like a still lake. Down in the yard, the young disciples gathered in a circle, their lively chatter like fledgling birds just out of the nest. They argued about ideals, about dreams, about grand plans each believed would change the world. One said he would travel everywhere, spreading the Dharma. Another dreamed of becoming a famous abbot admired by all. Another even wanted to establish a new temple, bigger, grander than this old one. Their voices and laughter echoed across the yard, but the old monk only sat there, no interruptions, no comments, no objections. He only tilted his head slightly to listen the corner of his mouth, lifting into a faint smile as if hearing distant echoes of himself long ago. After a while, as the debates began to quiet, a small novice shyly approached. He lifted his young face eyes bright with curiosity and asked in a clear voice, "Master, when you were young, were you like us? Did you ever dream of doing great things?" The evening breeze carried the scent of dry leaves and leftover incense from the main hall. The old monk chuckled softly, a rough woody sound, like old timber cracking in the sun. He looked toward the horizon, where the mountains lay faint and purple, and spoke slowly, like drops of water falling from roof tiles. "Of course, I was once a young disciple full of fantasies. I too wanted to do extraordinary things to leave a mark that would make the world remember my name, to believe that if I were skilled enough, determined enough, I could change everything." The disciples fell silent. The sunset light washed over the old monk's face, etching each wrinkle deep like winding paths, leading back to a faraway past. He continued his voice, lowering gentle as a sutra chanted at midnight. But then, time without noise and without knocking, slowly took away layer after layer of noise within me. It took away the hurried zeal. It took away the craving to be better than others. It even took away the pride that wanted to become a glorious name. I don't know when it happened. Only that one day, looking into the mirror, I no longer saw a young monk trying to change the world. There was only an old man quietly sweeping leaves in the temple yard and inside. A vast stillness. He smiled, his gaze softening, as if saying something very simple and very true. And what was left in the end was only compassion. The evening wind rustled through the old leaves like time whispering. None of the disciples said another word. The eyes that had burned with ambition now softened, deepened, grew quiet, as if in that moment each of them glimpsed themselves in a distant future, when all the clamor had faded and only a quiet heart remained, and kindness. One day all of them would grow old, like the old monk sitting silently on the veranda. No one escapes the cycle of time. No matter how tightly we try to hold on, youth slips away like water from cupped hands. And the most frightening thing is not growing old, for aging is natural, like leaves turning yellow, like day turning to dusk. What's frightening is reaching the end and realizing you spent nearly your entire life chasing things that hold no meaning once youth is gone. Fame that once set hearts ablaze fades like cold ash. Recognition that once seemed like everything quietly falls away like dried blossoms in the wind. Admiring gazes that once made your steps hurry, drift elsewhere when those who cheered have moved on to other paths in their lives. Time doesn't preserve anything except a person's true nature, and that is what most only realize near journey's end. In youth, it's easy to fall into the illusion that you must seize every minute to make a name, to stand out, to outshine everyone. But the Buddha taught all conditioned things are impermanent. Anything built on glamour without the roots of virtue and compassion will soon collapse like a sandcastle under the tide. Ambition is not a sin, but if it obscures compassion, then what you achieve is only a shell that cannot hold peace. Imagine this at the end of the road, hair-white hands trembling, the stage lights off, no applause. What truly remains in the eyes, looking back at you from the mirror? The image of someone once praised, once triumphant, but lonely and cold. Or the image of someone who never stood out, never drew applause, yet whose every step was steeped in kindness, living quietly each day for what is right and for the happiness of those around them. Because in the end, no one truly remembers what you said, whom you beat, or how many awards you won. People remember how they felt in your presence, at peace or on edge, warm or empty. Age comes to everyone, but not everyone passes through youth with a matured soul. Some grow gray while their hearts remain childish, full of conflict, competition, pride, and vanity. They think themselves immortal until strength leaves. The spotlight goes dark, and they realize there is nothing to cling to, not a single genuine hand that wants to stay. Those who choose to cultivate compassion are different. As they age, they are no longer youthful or quick, but their eyes soften, their steps grow light, and people naturally draw near. They don't dazzle or inspire feverish admiration, but they bring a sense of peace, as if just sitting beside them calms the heart. For the compassionate do not strive to be great. They quietly become a gentle refuge for weary hearts. And that is the mark that truly endures, a mark time cannot erase. Time can take many things: beauty that once drew admiration, strength that once made us feel invincible, and fame that once kept our steps from tiring. But there is one thing: time cannot touch a kind heart. Everything else fades, but once compassion takes root, it spreads quietly, like the scent of lotus lingering in the breeze, even after the flower has withered. So amid the relentless grind of modern life, as to-do lists stretch on and on, perhaps the most precious thing is not how much more you can do, but to stop now and then, be truly still, and ask yourself, what am I planting in others' hearts? Pressure or relief, strife or support? My personal ego or compassion that knows how to share? In today's society, youth prominence and shine are endlessly celebrated. Young people are pushed to succeed early, to make a big mark before 30, to amass achievements while still so young. But if you look closely at the lives of those truly worthy of respect, you'll see a simple truth. What makes them admirable is not staying young, not wealth, not prominence. Their common ground is this: when they pass by, others feel lighter. They may not make anyone gasp in awe, but they always bring peace to those around them. They don't leave behind a glow. They leave behind gentleness. So what matters is not extending youth, but what remains inside when youth has passed. A soul hardened by conflict, or a heart ripened in compassion. People often think youth is the most precious thing, but in truth, youth is only the outer shell. What's precious is who you become during those youthful years. It is compassion that keeps a person from truly growing old in the negative sense. When you live kindly, you no longer fear loss, because you know what's given from the heart will live on in others, like sunlight quietly ripening fruit without needing to witness the harvest. And when you live for others' well-being, you are no longer haunted by your own age, because each day has meaning beyond yourself. An elder with compassion walks as lightly as the young, their eyes still clear, unsullied by the dust of time. A young person without compassion, even in the spring of life, carries eyes already heavy and worn, as if burdened with the whole world and not knowing how to set it down. Time will strip away all that is shallow, but it cannot take a gentle heart. In the end, what remains is not how many years you lived, but how much good you left within those years. Time will never ask if you're ready. It doesn't need permission. It simply steps forward quietly like sunsets, arriving before anyone notices, silently taking bit by bit strength. You thought steadfast memory. You thought unfading quickness that fed your confidence and the bright appearance that once caught others' eyes. At the same time, time also offers you a gift, unshowy, quiet, but priceless. The chance to grow. The chance to let go of ego, to stop fighting to win, and to stop proving you're better than others. The chance to live more gently, more slowly, more kindly. If you seize that chance, age stops being a fear and becomes a worthy journey. Then each wrinkle on your face is no longer a sign of decay, but a tender carving from years of loving, much forgiving, much being patient and selfless, much. No one can resist time, but everyone can choose how they grow old. Some grow old in loneliness, bitterness, and regret because they spent their youth chasing what is fleeting, collecting praise that fades fast. Others grow old in ease within the gentle looks of others because they spent youth sowing love, cultivating a warm heart. What decides this isn't your age, but how you lived in your youngest years. Time may take away youth, but it will give back compassion if compassion is planted today. So don't waste youth on hollow glory. Don't trade precious years to chase names that pass in a blink. Live so that when time takes everything external, what remains inside is a warm heart, because that is the one thing that never grows old. That morning, the new sunlight spread gold across the temple courtyard, light as a thin silk cloth. On the moss-covered stone steps, a young novice sat cross-legged, eyes round hands, trembling slightly with excitement. In front of him was a brown cloth bundle, still smelling of sun, neat like a small treasure just opened. It was the first time he'd been given a robe of his own, the robe marking the day he officially became a part of this ancient temple. He lifted the robe with both hands, as if raising something sacred. The new fabric was soft and smooth, each seam still crisp, each thread glinting in the early light. When he put it on, he stood quietly by the small pond, looking at his reflection. His young face suddenly brightened, as if he were putting on not just a robe, but an entire dream. From that day on, the robe became a treasure in his small world. Every morning after practice, he gently folded the robe into a perfect square and placed it on the wooden rack as carefully as setting down a flower petal. When it was sunny, He brought the robe out to dry under the eaves, timing it so it caught just enough sun, not so strong that it would fade. When sudden rain came, he hugged the robe to his chest and ran quickly along the stone corridor. Drops splashed up, but none dared touch the fabric. He was afraid it would get dirty, afraid it would tear, afraid it would wear. He didn't dare sit on the ground to play with his friends, didn't dare climb trees like before, didn't dare run after butterflies in the yard. Day by day, he lived inside a circle of caution, like someone guarding the most precious thing in his life. Time kept passing quietly, like wind over the steps. The robe that once smelled of sunshine began to soften. The fresh brown color gradually faded like soil after rain. The sleeve edges frayed slightly. A few stitches came loose quietly like footprints fading on the stone path. One afternoon, when the sun had slanted, he brought the robe to wash at the well as usual. His small hands rubbed lightly over each weave, his eyes still carrying their familiar tenderness. But when he wrung it out, a small sound seemed to rip the air, reap. A long tear appeared, mottled like a wound. He froze. Then his trembling hands hugged the soaked robe tightly to his chest. Tears fell one by one, mixing with the well water, salty and bitter. My new robe. It's ruined. His voice caught shaking like a snapped thread. The master had been standing under the eaves, quietly watching, and slowly walked over. The last light of the day fell on his old kasaya, its shoulders more worn and faded than the robe in the boy's hands. But his face was bright like morning. He bent down and gently touched the boy's head, his voice deep and warm like a distant bell. Everything passes through the cycle of arising and ceasing. The novice looked up, eyes still wet, searching that calm gaze. In that moment, the entire courtyard seemed to fall silent. Only the light wind moved through the old Bodhi leaves, rustling like an ancient whisper. Nothing keeps its original form forever. The new robe will also become old, like spring giving way to summer, like black hair graying with frost. Like the very childhood on your shoulders one day, it too will fall away light as the last leaf of the season. But what remains is not the robe, it is how you live the days you wore it, the days you knew how to cherish it, to care for it, to treasure each small thread as if it were an entire dream. The robe only passes through your life. Respect and gratitude will stay. That sentence seems simple, but it is one of life's most important lessons. All material things are impermanent. Nothing stays new forever. A new robe will fray at the shoulders and fade with the years. A new house will see its paint dull, quietly aging with time. A new vehicle will scratch and break down after long journeys. Even a body full of vigor today will grow old day by day, cell by cell, like a leaf slowly yellowing in the autumn sun. Impermanence is a truth that spares no one. The paradox is that most people live as if they could escape it, grasping, clinging, controlling, and then fearing every sign of loss. Most of our deepest anxieties begin there. Afraid of losing a job, afraid of losing money, afraid of losing image, position, reputation, relationships. Afraid that if one day it all disappears, we ourselves will be nothing. But is that really true? Or is it because we mistakenly tied our self-worth to things that were never ours to keep many people when they first get something they've dreamed of, a house, a prestigious job, a passionate love, a coveted item, live as if intoxicated? They think, I will keep this forever. And from that very moment, they start to clutch. They start to fear. They stop enjoying and start controlling. Each day is no longer a day to live, but a day to guard. Until inevitably, that thing must leave, as everything in life must, and they collapse. Not because they lost it, but because they lost themselves while trying to hold on. The Buddha taught the 3 marks of existence: impermanence, non-self, and suffering. Because nothing lasts if we cling to things as me or mine, suffering is certain. Like the novice long ago who was so busy keeping his robe from dirt and wear that he forgot the joy of running under the afternoon sun. He thought holding tightly was love, but in fact, loving is to enjoy while it's here, not to lock it away in fear of losing it. Everything goes through a rising and ceasing, coming into being, existing, and then disappearing. Nothing lies outside that law, not objects, not careers, not affections, not youth, not even this very body. So the wisest thing is not to find ways to hold on. The wisest thing is to learn to let go gently. Not letting go because it doesn't matter, but letting go of the fear of loss so that when something leaves, your heart does not shatter with it. Maybe right now someone is clutching a new robe in their life. Maybe it's a relationship, a job, a position, an image of oneself, and they are exhausted from holding on. The tighter you grasp, the less you can enjoy it. When fear of loss fills the mind, the present is forgotten. Only anxious future scenarios remain. So instead of living like a treasure guard, live like someone admiring flowers. Admire them while they bloom. Smile when they fade. Keeping is not clutching. Keeping is enjoying while it's here and knowing how to smile when it goes. Only when the heart can release lightly can you truly live fully in each moment, not haunted by the past, not bound by the future, just quietly, at peace. When you understand that everything is impermanent, your view of life begins to change, gentler, quieter, and deeper. A broken item will no longer be enough to stir anger. A relationship closing will no longer make you feel worthless. A failure will no longer be the end, nor make the world collapse beneath your feet. Seeing the nature of impermanence, outer upheavals become like ripples on a lake, rising and fading, unable to disturb the depths within. What once caused the greatest suffering are in truth just robes temporarily worn for a time. And every robe will grow old. Careers, assets, status, praise, admiring, looks, all will fade. A doubt may arise: if I let go, will I still cherish what I have? The answer: letting go is not indifference. Letting go is loving without possessing. Letting go is treasuring without turning things into chains. This is the spirit of non-self the Buddha taught, seeing nothing as me or mine. Only when you no longer fear loss can you fully enjoy what you have. The one who knows a robe will age and fray is the very one who wears it with joy each day it's still new. They don't waste youth guarding every thread, nor let tomorrow's fear steal today's joy. If something in your life is fading, wearing out, or leaving, please don't be quick to grieve. An old robe doesn't mean love is gone. A chapter closing doesn't mean life is over. Loss doesn't make a person small. Clinging doesn't make anyone greater. What truly makes a soul steady isn't the amount of property, the position held, or the admiring eyes of others. It lies in the ability to stand still and be calm, even when all of that departs. A person's worth does not reside in anything that can decay. Not the robe you wear, not the house you live in, not the title you hold. Those are only temporary shells arising and passing per dependent conditions, as the Buddha reminded all conditioned things are impermanent, like dew on grass tips, like lightning in the night sky. Whoever understands this stops chasing after holding on. They live fully with what is here, yet their heart is not bound. They love while the precious things are beside them, and when it's time to let go, they can smile as lightly as releasing an autumn leaf. Only when the hands are light can the heart have room for peace to dwell. Only when you no longer cling to what constantly changes can the mind rest in what does not. Compassion, wisdom, inner freedom. This world is always changing. No one can keep everything intact. A new robe will grow old, and the things you hold today will also slip from your hands. And it is precisely in the moment you dare to let go gently that you can live truly, no longer living to keep, but living to love, to feel, to smile each time time passes quietly by. A quiet afternoon in the courtyard of an ancient mountainside temple. The day's last sunlight fell like thin strands of gold draped across the shade of the Bodhi trees. The cicadas had softened. Only the light breath of wind moved along the mossy tile eaves, carrying the earthy scent left by last night's rain. Beside the old well in the corner of the yard stood a large wooden water wheel, something newcomers to the temple often mistook for an old ornament. But each day it kept turning diligently, bucket after wooden bucket, rising in rhythm from the well, pouring into a bamboo trough, and from there the water ran along a narrow stone channel to the back garden. Each time the wheel turned, a soft creaking sounded slow, like the deep breathing of time. The wooden slats, darkened by sun and rain with peeling paint and speckles of moss, still moved steadily, day after day, season after season, year after year, as if they had never known fatigue. There was a young Zen monk in the temple who always stopped for a long time whenever he passed the wheel. No one knew why. While others were busy with their afternoon tasks, sweeping the yard, watering the garden, chanting, he often stood motionless under the Bodhi shade eyes following the turning wheel. Sometimes for a few minutes, sometimes for a very long time. Then one day, when the afternoon sun had turned honey-colored and the whole temple had slipped into a quiet midday slumber, he came to the wheel again. Instead of standing as usual, he quietly sat down on the worn stone paving, wrapped his arms around his knees, his gaze as if wanting to see through each revolution. The creaking sounded beat by beat, as steady as the distant clack of the wooden fish in the main hall. Each wooden bucket, soaked and heavy, was slowly drawn up from the deep, bottomless well. They moved slowly past half the wheel, then reached the highest point, where sunlight made each droplet sparkle like crystal. But only moments later, those buckets began to plunge down the other side, emptying their last drops into the bamboo trough, becoming light, then disappearing into space. And new buckets rose from the bottom, continuing the age-old cycle. The young monk kept his eyes on each movement, and his breathing gradually synced with the turning, until suddenly, a thought flashed bright in his mind, like lightning splitting the night. Everything is merely cycling through rebirth. The buckets, one by one, rise and fall, fill and empty, appear and vanish. None stays forever at the top, and none is lost forever in the depths. And life is the same. He remembered those who had come to and gone from this temple, those who had been very successful, admired by all, and then quietly left like a thin wisp of smoke. Those who had been in despair, who seemed broken, then one day stood up, smiling, radiant as a new sunrise. Everything goes like that sometimes, up, sometimes down. Nothing stands still. No one stays at the summit forever. No one lies at the bottom forever. And in that moment, the young monk realized something profound he had never truly understood. What makes people suffer is not that they are at the bottom. It's that they believe the bottom is forever. Just like those buckets, there is no need to scramble for the top and no need to despair when falling. The wheel still turns, the cycle still continues, the water still circulates, and not a single bucket truly disappears. A light breeze blew through, setting the Bodhi leaves rustling. The young monk sat still, the corner of his mouth lifting as if smiling to himself. In his eyes, there was no more hurry, no more anxious questions, only the quiet of someone who has just understood something very important. That in life's unending flow, what's needed is not to cling to a position. What's needed is to keep your heart from being crushed when the wheel turns. The water wheel does not choose which bucket rises and which falls. It simply turns quietly, steadily, without favor. And life is the same. There are seasons when everything seems to bloom at once. Work goes smoothly. Health is strong, relationships are happy, finances are stable. You walk lightly, as if every step falls on a carpet of flowers. People look on with admiration, and you yourself start to believe, maybe I'll stay like this from now on. But the wheel does not pause at the top. Once the highest point is reached, the buckets begin to descend, and so do you. Difficulties creep in your health dips. Plans run into snags. Those who were always there grow distant. What seemed certain starts to waver. If you don't understand that this is simply part of the natural cycle, you'll be easily dragged to two extremes: complacency at the top and despair at the bottom. In success, people often forget their roots. They forget the hard days that honed their courage and taught humility and patience. They begin to dismiss advice, look down on those who move more slowly, and ignore small warning signs. While absorbed in the view from the peak, they don't notice the wheel quietly turning, and one day, when everything shifts, they fall, panic, lose direction, and feel as if the world is collapsing. But the truth is nothing has collapsed. The wheel is simply turning as it always has. Life has no permanent summit, nor does it have a permanent abyss. They are only different points on the same circle. If you grasp this, your heart steadies. At the top, you won't grow arrogant because you know it's not you being better than others. It's simply the wheel having turned to your high point. At the bottom, you won't despair because you know it's not you being worthless. It's simply the wheel hasn't yet turned to lift you again. What keeps the wheel from hurting you is not trying to stop it. What keeps you from being crushed is awareness while it turns. Awareness is not standing outside the cycle. Awareness is knowing exactly where you are in the cycle and not letting your current position deceive you about your true worth. At the top, keep humility, keep gratitude. Remember that there are people below who need your hand. At the bottom, don't judge yourself. Don't condemn yourself. Just quietly stand up and keep going because you know the cycle will carry you upward again. The Buddha taught impermanence, that all conditioned things arise and cease, come together, and fall apart. Seeing impermanence doesn't make you pessimistic. It helps you stop clinging, stop arrogance in prosperity, stop despair in decline. Understanding impermanence is the key to living amid change without being swept away. Look at the seasons of the year. No spring lasts forever, and no winter is endless. Look at the sky. No dawn stands still, and no night fails to break. Yet when people enter the winter of their lives, they often forget this. They think darkness will cover everything forever, that nothing will ever improve. But every season passes. And when it does, what remains is not that you defeated winter, but how you went through it. That is what determines whether you truly grow with each revolution, not your place on the wheel, but how you keep awareness as the wheel turns. There is something very subtle. Once you are no longer fooled by the wheel of time, you begin to savor each moment, whether you are at the peak or at the depths. No longer fixated on a glorious tomorrow, no longer sunk in nostalgia for a dazzling yesterday. You learn to live fully with the moments you have. In prosperity, you cherish even the smallest things, a simple meal, a plain greeting, knowing no season endures forever. Precisely because you know it will pass, you live more fully with what is present. In hardship, you keep your calm. You don't condemn yourself because of adversity. You don't lose hope because of loss, because you understand this is only a short stretch, not the entire journey. Those who don't understand cycles are swept away by them. Those who do ride them to grow. In modern society, people are pressured to judge one another by temporary positions, high or low win or lose success or failure. But the truth is, no one stands still at one point forever. The one at the bottom today may be the one rising to the top tomorrow. And the one standing at the top today may be the one slipping tomorrow. Therefore, what is precious is not where you stand, but your ability to keep a steady heart wherever you stand. If today you are at the bottom of the wheel, do not despair, not because you're inferior, but because you're gathering strength to return. If today you are at the top, don't be arrogant, not because you're invincible, but because you're passing through a bright stretch of the cycle. The wheel does not turn to lift anyone forever. It turns to remind everyone everything changes. The Buddha taught impermanence, that all conditioned things arise and cease, flourish and fade. Understanding impermanence doesn't make people gloomy. It teaches them to bow in prosperity and stand up in failure. No one truly wins forever, and no one loses forever. We are all simply at different points on the same turning. So the only thing you can truly control is not the wheel, but your mind as the wheel turns. You cannot slow time. You cannot stop change, but you can keep from being carried away. In success, remain humble. In failure, remain patient. In joy, remember to share. In sorrow, remember to be gentle with yourself. That is the only way the wheel stops being a threat. For the wheel of time will never stop, but the awakened no longer feel swept along. They stand at the hub, watching the revolutions glide by, and whether the wheel lifts them high or pulls them low, their hearts remain still, like a calm lake beneath passing ripples. Remember, understand the cycle, so you won't be caught in it. Understand that rise and fall are recurring beats, while those who keep a clear heart will no longer be driven by those turns. For when the heart is at peace, no matter how far the wheel of time may spin, you can still smile and walk on in calm. That night, the ancient temple seemed to sink into a deep sleep. A pale moon hung above the treetops, its silver light slanting across the moss-covered roof tiles. A light breeze slipped through the gaps of the half-closed wooden doors, carrying the faint, lingering scent of incense that had burned out earlier in the evening. Inside the meditation room lay at the end of a silent corridor. The old wooden door creaked as it was pushed ajar, revealing a small space simple and solemn, as if time had stopped there. No voices, no footsteps, only a small candle burning on the old wooden table. The candle's soft golden light flickered like a small breathing soul. It cast gentle bands of light across the rough stone wall, making the dim gray room seem gently dreamlike. Outside, thin breaths of wind slipped through the window bars, so light they couldn't stir the curtain, but just enough to make the flame quiver. It was so still that you could hear each drop of wax fall onto the brass dish, soft, faint taps sounding steadily like time's slow counting. A young disciple stood quietly in the corner. His eyes were wide, reflecting the burning flame. He stared at the candle as if afraid that with a single blink, that light would vanish. Time passed. The candle grew shorter, and the light weakened little by little. The flame no longer danced. It only hovered at the wick's tip, fragile as the last breath of a small living thing. The disciple swallowed his hands, unconsciously gripping his robe. A nameless ache rose in his chest as if he were watching something precious fade away and could do nothing to keep it. Then, a soft puff, the candle went out. A thin wisp of smoke rose, curled in the air, then faded into the dark. The room was instantly swallowed by deep, breathless darkness. The disciple's eyes still faced the table that had glowed only seconds before. Now there was only a streak of cooling white wax. His throat tightened. In a trembling whisper, as if afraid to break the silence, he said, "The candle has gone out, Master." The Zen master, who had sat still since the beginning, gently opened his eyes. His gaze remained calm like a lake at night without a ripple. He followed the thinning wisp of smoke and said slowly, "Do not weep when a candle goes out, for it has already lit the night." The disciple froze. Those words were light as a breeze, yet in his heart they fell heavy, like a stone dropping into a deep well. In the darkness, he suddenly saw what the light had kept hidden. That candle, though small, had stood quietly in the night, burning itself bit by bit until there was nothing left to burn. It did not complain about its shortness, nor fear its end. It did the only thing it could. It shone. Until the very last moment, and when the candle went out, the darkness returned. But it was not the same darkness as before, because in his heart the light remained. The disciple stood there a long time. Outside, the night breeze slipped along the corridor, carrying the scent of damp earth and wild flowers. The stars in the sky seemed brighter. He knew. The candle had gone out, but its light had already sown a seed of brightness in his heart, a seed that would never go out. There is something very profound in those words. A candle's value does not lie in how long it burns. Its value lies in how many moments of darkness it has illuminated. And people are the same. We often live as if we will exist forever, as if time were limitless and death a distant story belonging to someone else. So we postpone what truly matters. We delay words of love, hold back an embrace, forget to say thank you. Skip the quiet moments of simply sitting together to throw ourselves into the endless race for money, status, achievements, and position. We reassure ourselves, one day I'll slow down. One day I'll love more. One day I'll enjoy life when I've succeeded. But time does not wait. And a human lifespan is as fragile as a candle's. No one knows how many drops of wax remain in their own candle. In the teaching of impermanence, the Buddha reminded us everything that exists changes from moment to moment. Nothing is fixed. No one knows whether the next breath will still be there. Precisely because of this, life is precious. So the frightening thing is not death. It is living as if death will not come, only to look back and realize an entire life has passed in postponement. Modern people often try every way to extend life supplements, anti-aging technologies, wellness plans mapped out by the day. They try to slow time's steps, treating death like an enemy. But the truth is, death is not the opposite of life. It is an essential part of life. It is like an alarm bell reminding each person to live worthily in every moment they still have, because it knows it will go out the candle shines with all it has from the first second it's lit. Because we know we will fade, we cherish each minute that still shines. A human life's true value is not in its length, but in how we live within that finite span. A candle that burns long but stays hidden in a drawer leaves nothing but a cold lump of wax. But a candle that burns for a few hours, if it lights the way, warms the air, and gives hope to those walking in darkness, that light will go on living in others' memories long after the candle has gone out. Life is the same. A long life is not necessarily a meaningful one. A meaningful life is when each day you still shine, still breathe, still show up. You devote some of that light to easing the darkness in others' hearts. Pause for a moment amid the rush and ask yourself, am I truly living or merely existing while waiting for someday to begin living? Have I spoken words of love to the people who matter? Have I forgiven old mistakes? Have I truly enjoyed a simple meal with my family? Unhurried, no screens, no worries. A candle doesn't wait until it's almost out to start shining. And we don't need to wait until death draws near to live each day fully. Because what makes a life valuable is not how long it lasts, but how much it lessens the darkness of the world. One day, each person's candle will burn out. That is a truth no one can escape, like dawn, yielding to dusk, like spring, passing so autumn can return. But if a life has been lived fully, the final moment will no longer be a tragedy. It will simply be the gentle ending of a song that has played every note and beat completely. Then there will be no regret that time has passed, no fear of not having done what mattered, only a calm look back and a soft smile like the Zen master watching the thinning smoke I have lit this night with all the light I had. If there is still breath in your chest, your life's candle is still burning. That light may be faint, not dazzling, but it is enough to lift a little darkness around you. And what gives that light meaning is not its brightness, but its warmth. We live not to outshine others, not to become a blazing torch on a high peak, but to become a gentle glow that helps someone find their way through their darkest moments. The value of a life is not measured by how far you go, but by how truly you live each day. To live truly is to let words come from sincerity, actions from care, and each moment be lived with gratitude. When you can do that day by day, the final moment will no longer be frightening, because you will know not a single day was wasted, not a single chance to love was missed. Live fully, not to be more radiant than anyone, but so you do not betray yourself. For when the candle goes out, people do not weep because the light is gone. They smile because they were once warmed by it. And then, even as the body returns to dust, the light once given will remain glimmering in the hearts of those it illuminated, like small stars that still shine in the sky after the night has passed. The afternoon slanted across the mossy tiles, and sunlight, thin as golden thread, slipped into the old room at the end of the corridor. The small room with rough stone walls carried a scent that was hard to name, a blend of old wood and temple incense. Tiny motes of dust drifted in the beam of light, sparkling like a school of little fish swimming in still water. On the wall to the left hung an old painting, silent. The wooden frame was dark. A fine crack in the lower corner ran long and thin like a crow's foot. People said the painting had once been radiant red, like a newly ignited flame green, like freshly polished jade gold, like a halo around a bronze bell. In the beginning, the brush strokes were so sharp that if you stood close, you almost felt you could hear the painter's breath lingering on the canvas. The years flowed by like water over stone. Each rainy season added a layer of damp. Each dry season, a layer of dust. Colors thinned. Outlines once sharp as a blade softened, dissolving into each other like smoke. Where the sunlight touched most, often the colors faded to a gentle pale, soft as old silk. If someone just glanced at it, they might say, "There's nothing left to see." The young novice stopped in front of the painting. His eyes, usually bright as morning dew, were veiled today with a thin layer of cloud. He tilted his head, stepped back, then moved closer again, as if hoping to catch something that had slipped away. His hand rose without thinking, hesitating above the fine dust that lay over the surface. "The painting has faded," he said softly, sorrow clear at the corner of his mouth. "It isn't beautiful anymore." The door opened a little wider. The master stepped in, moving as gently as a falling leaf. His brown robe was worn at the shoulders, but his eyes were warm like embers kept a long time in the hearth. He stood beside the boy and didn't answer right away. After a moment, he smiled lightly. "What do you see in it?" "I see just pale patches of color flattened into one another. I don't make out the clear forms the older brothers talked about," the novice admitted. The master didn't look at the painting immediately. He let his gaze pass to the small window where a shaft of sunlight was slowly creeping across the brick floor. Then with his sleeve, he gently wiped a corner at the painting's edge. A thin film of dust lifted, revealing beneath the haze a light but decisive stroke like a bird's footprint skimming a lake's surface. "It's the same patch of color, yet when the dust goes, you see it differently," he said. "So what makes the difference, the painting or your eye?" The novice hesitated. The master handed him a soft cloth. "Wipe another small area. But don't press hard. Don't try to drag the painting's youth back. It's only so you can see color may fade, but the mind can grow clearer." The boy did as told, moving slowly. Each pass of the cloth revealed beneath the dust a gentle curve, a subtle accent, not clear but enough to suggest. He suddenly felt as if he were turning the pages of time. "Master, why does the painting look different to me now? Though it's still faded, there's something warmer about it." The master nodded. "You changed where you stand. When you lean close, you see only strokes. When you step back, you see composition. When you change the light, you see tone. The same painting, yet each way of looking is another painting. True beauty lies in the viewer's mind, because the mind is the lamp for all things. Change the lamp, and the scene changes." He pulled over a wooden chair and invited the boy to sit. On the table sat a bowl of clear water. The master tipped it slightly so the sunlight slid across the surface, casting a shimmering patch of light on the wall. "See, the stone wall is still rough, but when the water's reflection hits it, it seems to soften. Did the wall change? No. What changed is the light, and the one who holds the switch for that light is usually not the outside world, but your mind." The novice was silent. In the room, the old wooden clock ticked like a distant heartbeat. Outside, the evening breeze moved through the Bodhi canopy, scattering trembling flecks of light across the bricks. "When I was young," the master said slowly, as if telling someone else's story, "someone brought me a porcelain bowl with a chipped rim. I said it was ugly. The old seller only smiled. 'You haven't drunk tea from this bowl yet.' The next day, I poured in hot water. Faint veins in the glaze appeared like a spring beneath the stones. The tea released its fragrance, and the bowl wasn't ugly anymore. Was that beauty already in the bowl, or in the tea, or in the opening of the drinker's heart?" The novice smiled softly. The smile shattered some of the cloud lodged in his eyes. "But master, if a painting has faded too much, is there anything left to look at? When the colors have faded so far, there's nothing left to tell." The master pointed to the wall. "The frame will tell it whose hand made this scratch and why only one corner is worn, why this nail sits crooked, how the worms ran through the wood in the rainy season. Each mark is time's handwriting. What's lost isn't the only story. What appears is meaning. Youth's beauty is brilliance. Old age's beauty is affection and depth." He had the boy step back 3 paces, then close his eyes and take a deep breath. "Now don't look with your eyes. Look with memory. When do you think the painter worked? What sounds do you hear in the painting? What scent? What rhythm?" The novice closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his lids, the painting no longer appeared as faded patches. He seemed to hear a brush gliding over canvas, whispering like the season's first wind. There was the light smell of linseed oil, the scent of a new wooden frame, the smell of the painter's hands. He felt a steady rhythm, neither hurried nor slow like the temple drum before dawn. When he opened his eyes, the painting was still faded, but he no longer felt sad. "You're seeing the painter, not only what was painted," the master said, "and from the painter, you return to the viewer. When beauty completes that full circle, it's no longer a matter of the eye, but of the heart." The boy pressed his palm to the wooden frame, and felt warmth. The master took a very soft squirrel hairbrush and dusted the painting once more. The sunlight shifted. A cloud had just drifted across the small window. In that softened light, the faded areas turned like mist drifting. Vague shapes emerged: a distant mountain slope, an earthen road, a tiny line of people walking toward a temple. Everything half there, half not, but enough to ease the boy's heart open. "Master," he whispered, "so it isn't that the painting has stopped being beautiful. It's that I looked at the ending as a loss, but in truth, ending is just another form of enough." The master smiled, eyes pleased, like someone hearing a bell chime at just the right moment. "You've just taught yourself something. Enough isn't when things are intact. It's when the heart stops demanding more. A painting, a person, a single day, all the same." He rose and went to the window, sliding the wooden latch. The window opened wider. Sunlight slanted in from a different angle. The painting changed tone once more. The earthen road gleamed more golden, and the distant figures seemed to move closer. The novice laughed. "How strange. Just change the light, and everything shifts." "Living the same life is like that too," the master replied. "Change the way you see, and you change the whole sky." Some see a wrinkle as a flaw. Others see it as a keepsake. Some see dust as dirt. Others see dust as time dropping by. True beauty lives in the viewer's heart. In the hush, a full round peal of the temple bell drifted from afar. The novice pressed his palms together and bowed to the painting. He no longer wished to pull it back to its original brilliance, nor felt sad for the faded hues. He felt only something simple. He was fortunate to stand here to see, to feel, to breathe with what has passed and what remains. The master watched him, saying nothing more. He lifted the bowl of water from the table and lightly watered the small potted plant in the corner. Drops clung to the leaves, catching the light like clear marbles. Outside, the wind rose again. A Bodhi leaf, thin and gold as silk, drifted through the window and settled on the painting's frame. The boy gently picked it up and slipped it between the pages of his yellowed notebook. He thought, "I'll keep a little gold from this afternoon." They left the room and closed the door. Inside, the painting stayed hanging silently on the stone wall of an old room with a small sunlit window. It did not grow young again. It did not grow older. It simply kept breathing with the breath of time inside the hearts of those willing to stop and look. And the master's brief words, like a small bird circling the temple roof, came to rest somewhere in the listener's chest. True beauty lives in the viewer's heart. That sentence may seem gentle, but it holds a profound truth of life. Appearances may fade, but true value endures. And that holds not only for a painting, but for people as well. Today's society raises us amid flashy yardsticks, standards advertised as truths: be youthful, be radiant, always move faster than others, become someone everyone admires. On social media, out on the street, in everyday conversations, those perfect images surround us, leading many to believe their worth lies in what others see on the surface. They pour time, money, and effort into staying new on trend, never falling behind, always standing out in others' eyes. But in that race, many don't realize they're trading inner sincerity for a glow that exists only in other people's gaze, a layer of color that time will surely wash away. Look deeper, and you'll see the beauty of youth, of appearance, of outward glitz, is the beauty of color. And all color, no matter how radiant, fades, like an old painting after many seasons of sun and wind, like black hair turning silver, like smooth skin giving way to lines, like fiery eyes becoming contemplative. It's a natural law no one escapes. If we place our worth in what must fade, we'll live our whole lives in fear of aging, of losing looks, of losing status, of being forgotten. But more frightening than fading is becoming hollow inside, just to maintain a temporary surface. You might ask, if the outside fades, what remains of me? The answer lies in what the Buddha taught. This body is impermanent, but wholesome deeds and character follow us through lifetimes. Like a painting, even if the colors disappear, if each stroke once held devotion and each detail carried the painter's soul, viewers can still sense beauty from deep within. People are the same. Outward form fades, but honesty, kindness, virtue, compassion never fade. Yet many when young live almost entirely for approval. They dress to fit trends, speak to please, act to be praised, post online for likes. They don't live to understand themselves, but to satisfy the crowd. Then, when the years take the surface away, they're confused and empty because they no longer know who they are, apart from the shells they once layered on. That's the tragedy of a life under bright lights that never once turned inward. By contrast, there are people who never try to shine, yet others can't look away. Not because they are young, not because they are striking, but because they are true. They live gently, sincerely, unhurriedly. They don't try to impress, yet everyone near them feels at peace. Their smiles are light as a cool breeze, their gaze warm as morning sun. Their beauty doesn't lie in color, something time can take, but in the light that radiates from within, which time can never touch. That is enduring beauty, the beauty of a soul that no longer needs to prove anything, that quietly shines simply because it is light. And that very light, not any flashy coating, is what makes a person timeless. If today someone fears they are not like before, the first thing to remember is no one was born to stay the same. We weren't made to stand still. We were born to move, to change, to grow. Youth will pass, prominence will fade, admiring eyes will turn to new faces. But that doesn't mean a person's worth vanishes with their looks. On the contrary, true worth only begins to show as time gently removes the outer glow. People don't remember exactly what someone wore, how young they looked, or what impression they made, but they remember clearly how that person made them feel, understood, valued, loved. In today's busy world where everyone chases outer attention, those who live sincerely become rare havens of peace. And that is what makes them truly memorable, not a dazzling image, but the warmth felt in their presence. Even fading carries a quiet beauty. The last leaf of autumn isn't beautiful because it's still green, but because it knows it will fall and still glints in the late sun. An old painting isn't beautiful because the colors remain, but because each faded patch is a trace of time's touch, a sign that it existed, and once moved someone to stand silently in awe. People are the same. Beauty isn't in preserving what was, but in daring to live sincerely, even as the years lay dust upon us. Society often teaches us to live for recognition, to impress, to stand out, to win. But recognition is only a passing glance. Sincerity is what stays. A person who lives truthfully doesn't need to make up a soul, inflate their story, or blaze to be seen. They simply show up with complete honesty. And that honesty is what time cannot fade. As the years pass, the world may forget the name of someone who once stood out, but anyone who was touched by their kindness will remember, like how people still linger before an old faded painting, not for its colors, but for the spirit soaked into each stroke. That is beauty that doesn't depend on others' eyes. It shines from within, unshakable. So don't fear if your appearance is no longer as it was, if admiring glances have grown fewer. What makes a person truly beautiful has never been age or spotlight, but the quiet light of genuineness. And that light, when tended day by day, will never fade, even when all the colors have fallen away. In a quiet valley where ranges of mountains veiled in morning mist encircle the old temple, like the embrace of time, spring had gently set down its first footsteps. The garden behind the temple, silent all winter, suddenly bloomed as if waking from a long sleep. Tiny new shoots sprouted from dry branches, like small fingers stretching to greet the sun. Night dew still clung to the leaves, shimmering like pearls in the early light. The air softened. The spring breeze carried the scent of damp earth and the first hint of blossoms. Clusters of plum and peach flowers burst open in full color, pale pink threading through tender green, making the whole garden look like a painting, just finished by the artist, the ink not yet dry. A young student, his face still innocent, his eyes shining as if reflecting the whole of spring, sat quietly beneath an ancient peach tree. In his hands was a book he hadn't opened. His mind wasn't in its pages. It drifted with the petals falling in the wind. The petals were so light they seemed weightless, circling lazily a few times before landing on the soft grass, leaving a faint blush like a fleeting dream. He watched for a long time until he let out a sigh without realizing it, his voice sad, as if he had just lost something. "Master, spring is so beautiful, but soon it will pass." The teacher was pruning a small plum by the stone well. Hearing this, he paused. His back was slightly bent, his brown robe worn at the shoulders, his thin hands steady, with the calm of a stream that never rushes. He didn't answer right away. Slowly slipping the shears back into their leather case, he walked over to the student and lifted his gaze to the peach branches, heavy with blossoms like pink clouds caught in the blue sky. A light breeze passed. Flowers fell like rain, spinning and dissolving into the morning sun. The teacher smiled, his eyes gentle, as if they had lived through 100 springs, his voice low and soft as a breath of wind. Precisely because spring is short, it is precious. The student looked up, sadness still in his eyes. The teacher sat beside him, fingers brushing a petal that had just landed on his knee. "You see, if spring lasted forever, if flowers bloomed all year, would you still sit here, stunned, watching each falling petal like a treasure? Or would you pass them by as though they were just an ordinary part of the sky?" The student stayed silent. Things are precious because they are fragile. The teacher continued, his voice slow as the beats of time, like that drop of dew which sparkles for only a single morning, like the cicadas of summer, noisy and quick to fade, like the gaze of youth, bright only for a short stretch of a human life, and like this very breath, no one knows how many more remain. He paused, eyes still following the circling petals. When you understand that everything is impermanent, you won't be sad about change. You'll feel grateful to have seen it, even if only for a moment. His words sounded in the small courtyard, blending with the spring breeze, and the student's heart softened. He looked around the garden where new shoots peeked out, where petals cast a pink veil over the lawn, where each drop of dew was dissolving into mist. He suddenly understood. If spring weren't brief, no one would ever truly cherish each falling petal. If a human life weren't finite, no one would ever learn to love with all they have in each moment. The teacher patted his shoulder, then rose to continue his work, his small figure among the blooming garden seeming to merge with the earth and sky. The student stayed seated, but his eyes were no longer sad. They were clearer, as if reflecting a sky that had grown a shade bluer. Another petal fell into his hand. He smiled slightly, no longer lamenting that spring would pass, feeling instead a lightness like a passing breeze. Because now he understood beauty doesn't lie in how long it lasts, but in whether, while it is here, we truly live fully enough to see it. That seemingly simple sentence is one of the deepest truths of life. Beauty lies in the transience of all things. And yet people often forget this obvious fact. We become enamored of beauty and want to hold it as if grasping it could make time stand still. We feel happiness and then fear losing it, as if clinging would keep it from fading. We hope brilliant days will go on forever and panic when they wane, as if light is only valuable when it never goes out. But if spring didn't pass, how would we know the gentle gold of autumn leaves? If day didn't end, how could we see how radiant dawn can be? All the things that move us most are brief. A tender glance in passing, an afternoon with someone who doesn't have much time left, a season of flowers that bloom for only a few weeks and then fall. They're precious, not because they endure, but because they come once and then go. And yet most of life's suffering comes from resisting that law. We regret youth gone, by grow angry when happiness won't stay longer, ache when affection fades, feel lost when what seemed certain suddenly changes. The harder we try to hold on, the faster time seems to slip through our fingers. Like the student saddened by how quickly spring passes, forgetting that its brevity is what makes each petal priceless, so it is with life. No one stays 20 forever. No love remains as fervent as at the beginning. No pain lasts eternally, and no happiness remains unchanged forever. Everything flows. What makes us suffer is not change itself, but the illusion that things will stay if we just try hard enough. In the Buddha's teaching, the truth of impermanence has been spoken for ages. All conditioned phenomena are impermanent. Every phenomenon in life, body matter, feelings, thoughts arises, exists for a time, then dissolves. Nothing lies outside the cycle of arising, abiding, changing, and ceasing. When this is understood, not just with the mind, but with the heart, we begin to loosen our grip. We no longer cling to the spring that has passed, but learn to honor the autumn arriving. We no longer mourn lost youth, but see old age as a fragrant ripening, a season of stillness and depth that youth could never have. In truth, precisely because time moves quickly, each moment becomes precious. If life were unchanging, nothing would move us. If everything were always there, we would no longer feel gratitude for its presence. Brevity is what makes love sacred, a smile memorable, and each moment worth living. Yet in modern society, people fear loss too much. Afraid of losing beauty, we race against age. Afraid of losing our position, we strain without rest. Afraid of losing love, attention, approval, we cling to what is past and don't dare let go. We try to extend the spring of our lives by any means as if change were the enemy. But the truth is, change isn't the enemy. Change is the current that keeps life going. Without change, flowers wouldn't bloom, leaves wouldn't fall, fruit wouldn't ripen, and people wouldn't grow. When we accept change as a natural part of living, our hearts begin to feel lighter. We don't regret the spring that's gone. because we know autumn has its own beauty. We don't fear time because we understand that flow itself gives presence its meaning. Each day, instead of straining to hold what is fading, we learn to cherish it while it's here and smile when it goes. Because in the end, true beauty isn't in how long it lasts, but in whether, while it is here, we have lived fully enough to see it. Rather than regretting seasons past, learn to value the season you're living now. Life isn't measured by the number of years that have gone by, but by how you live each moment of the present. When you are happy, don't rush to fear that it will soon end. That very fear keeps you from fully enjoying the joy you have. Happiness doesn't have to last forever to be precious. It's precious because it is brief and fragile, so every second within it shines brighter more vividly. And when you are sad, don't think the darkness will swallow you forever. No winter lasts endlessly. Spring always returns, sometimes slowly but surely. And perhaps in those days that feel coldest, spring seeds are already sprouting quietly under the ground. There is a secret to peace that few are willing to learn. Accept change. Accept that life doesn't owe you permanence. Accept that the person you love today may leave on some unexpected tomorrow. Accept that you yourself are changing every day in how you think, see, love, and smile at the world. The truth is, no one can remain exactly who they were 5 years ago, just as no one can frame the people they love in the image they have today. And when you accept change as a natural part of life, fear will begin to fall from your shoulders, because you're no longer straining to hold on. You only need to live fully in the season in your hands. Love with all your heart, savor with all your might, and be ready to let go when that season passes, so your hands are wide enough to welcome the next. Many worry that if they loosen their grip, they'll lose their drive to live. But the opposite is true. When you release attachment, you don't lose motivation, you lose fear. And when you're no longer bound by fear, you are finally free to live, free to love because you no longer fear being left, free to create because you're no longer haunted by failure, free to enjoy each season of life because you know each one has its own beauty even as it passes. Spring will give way to autumn as morning sun will fade and night will fall. Every moment in life is the same, fresh, radiant, then quietly softening to make room for another hue. No one can freeze time to keep one spring forever. And in truth, you don't need to. If spring didn't leave, summer wouldn't come. If happiness didn't fade, you'd never learn gratitude while you have it. So don't try to hold spring. Love it while it's here and smile when it goes. Let joy remain untainted by the fear of loss. Because you know no season is final. Only those who love each season will no longer regret any of them. Love life not because it is long, but because it is always changing. If everything stood still, life wouldn't be a river. It would be a stagnant pond, without scent, without color, without movement. Precisely because spring is short, it is precious. Precisely because life changes, it is beautiful. And knowing this, you can live each day as if it were the only spring of your life, whole, gentle, and without regret. Late autumn afternoon, the temple courtyard deepened like a golden silk cloth worn by time. The sun hung low, tipping its light across the old bricks, each one stamped with the footprints of those who had passed through many seasons of rain and sun. The great hall bell had just finished ringing, its resonance still lingering somewhere among the moss-covered tiles. By the veranda, the old Bodhi tree stood silent like a teller of old tales, its canopy spread wide, its thin golden leaves quivering like butterfly wings in the chilly breeze. Sunlight scattered a thin golden carpet laid lightly over the steps, the rim of the stone well, and the straw broom leaning loosely against a wooden pillar. In that stillness, small, hurried footsteps broke the quiet. A tiny novice darted out from behind the bamboo grove, worn sandals flapping the hem of his brown robe fluttering behind him. His eyes shone like two stars. His cheeks were pink from the cold. He looked up into the Bodhi canopy, craning his neck until the tip of his nose pointed at the sky, then suddenly stopped. At his feet, a golden leaf lay still, so thin the sunlight shone through it, revealing fine veins like the map of some secret land. He bent down and lifted the leaf with both hands, as if raising a newly found treasure. The leaf was slightly curved, its edges lightly frayed, its stem dry and brittle. Yet in his small hands it glittered like the last ray of the season. He smiled, a clear smile spilling into the corners of his eyes. Then he let out a small cry, as if afraid to startle the evening master. Clutching the leaf to his chest, he ran across the courtyard. His little sandals tapped evenly on the bricks. A hint of kitchen smoke drifted from the back house, mixing with the scent of incense and dry leaves, making the late afternoon air thicker, warmer. At the steps, he stopped to catch his breath, eyes still bright. The teacher sat beneath the eaves fingers, moving over a rosary, gazing out at the courtyard, where flecks of sunlight were turning honey-colored. His eyes were as gentle as the clear sky beyond the ridge. The boy raised the leaf, his voice tight with excitement, yet still ringing. "Master, I found the last leaf of autumn." For a moment, time seemed to hold its breath. The golden silk of sunlight stretched a little tighter. The sparrows on the roof fell silent. The old temple listened to a child's joy. The teacher looked at him, a very small smile at the corner of his mouth, a soft light in his eyes like a flame cupped in a palm. He drew a deep breath and lifted the leaf to his forehead as if offering a treasure. Just then, a thin breeze slipped in from the triple gate entrance. It wasn't cold, just cool enough to stir the wind chime under the eaves and lift a few baby hairs on his forehead. The golden leaf in his hand, lighter than a whisper, slipped free of his small fingertips. It rose and spun, once playful. He snatched at it, missed. The leaf spun again higher, gliding through a slant of sun, its color shifting from honey gold to lemon gold. Then the wind bore it away across the courtyard, past the edge of the golden carpet, toward the row of bamboo at the far end of the garden. In the blink of an eye, it vanished beyond a patch of pale, milky cloud. The smile froze on his lips. The shine at the corners of his eyes turned to real tears. He stood as if the ground had been pulled away, both hands still poised in their cradling shape, now empty. For a moment, he hoped the leaf would come back like a butterfly changing its mind. But no. The wind had taken it, as the wind does. When he understood that the leaf had truly left his hand, the first sob broke small as the crack of sun-dried wood. Then he burst into tears, the cry of a child who has just lost what he believed was the last, the only. The teacher left his bamboo chair and stepped closer. The rustle of his robe blended with the soft shaking of the Bodhi leaves. He set a warm hand on the boy's shoulder. It smelled of aloes wood and morning sun firm and soothing like a safe harbor. "You're crying because the leaf fell," he said slowly, voice as low as a breeze, "but you also just laughed when you saw it fall." The boy looked up, eyes wet and trembling, as if the words had opened a door he'd never known. The teacher's hand stroked his shoulder. His gaze did not follow the lost leaf, but rested in the clouding eyes of the child. "Was the leaf in your hand precious?" he asked. The boy nodded, tears still clinging to his lashes. "Why was it precious? Because it was the last leaf of autumn." The teacher smiled softly. "Then when it fell from your hand, did autumn disappear?" The boy blinked. The courtyard was still gold. Leaves still trembled on the branches. The smell of kitchen smoke was still warm. Far off, a tardy rooster called into the evening. He looked around as if the answer had dropped somewhere on the bricks. "I think autumn is still here," he whispered. "Yes," the teacher nodded. "Autumn isn't contained in a single leaf. Just as joy isn't contained in what you clutch. You laughed when you saw the leaf fall because you saw the beauty of that moment. You cried when it left your hand because you thought that moment was gone. But that moment is still here, inside your heart." The breeze came again, light as a hand smoothing a child's hair. A few more leaves let go, spiraled through the air and fell onto the golden carpet. They fell without breaking anything. They only made the late autumn evening more complete. The teacher led him closer to the Bodhi trunk. He pointed to a leaf still hugging its branch, green tinged with yellow, the veins clear like a half-written score. "This one might fall tomorrow. That one, the day after. Another waits for a slower wind. But in the end, all of them go. Not because the wind is cruel, but because that is how autumn completes itself. You called your leaf the last, but who can know? There might be a tiny leaf on the far side of the crown that your eyes didn't see. Or perhaps the leaf you found wasn't the tree's last, only the last within your field of view. Last is often something our hearts name to make our attachment stronger." The boy listened. The sobs had quieted. Traces of wet still marked his face, but his eyes were clearer like a pond after ripples settle. "Do you remember how the leaf spun when it lifted from your hand?" the teacher asked. "You watched it. Your eyes lit up. You drew a deep breath. In that moment, were you sad?" He shook his head. "Why not?" "Because it was so beautiful. I was afraid if I blinked, I'd miss it." "Right. You lived that moment fully. Then you cried because you believed the beauty had left you. But the beauty wasn't in keeping the leaf. It was in opening your eyes as wide as you could to watch it spin, and opening your heart as wide as you could to receive it as it fell. Everything passes like this very moment. What remains isn't what you hold. It's your wakefulness as it goes by." He looked at his empty hands. Without thinking, he spread them wider, as if to receive something else, not a leaf, but the current of air slipping through his fingers. The wind didn't stay, but the cool feeling did, and the smile stayed with it. "Master, if next time I meet a leaf that wants to fly, what should I do?" The teacher smiled, gentle as kitchen smoke. "You can lift it to see it more clearly. You can hold it for a moment in gratitude. Then you can open your hand to the wind. Some things are beautiful only when they're allowed to go, like this season's leaves, like the laughter you just released, like your very childhood." He bent down, picked up another leaf that had just fallen by the steps, and placed it in the boy's palm. Keep this one if you want, but don't call it the last. Call it the leaf you have now." The boy nodded, fingers closing softly without squeezing. The two of them stood for a long while, listening to the evening breathe. High above, a few thin clouds were changing color, their edges tinged pink like a child's cheeks after a long run. The temple bell rang once more, round and warm, breaking into invisible ripples that spread across the courtyard. When the sun's shadow had withdrawn from the golden carpet, the small novice and the teacher walked slowly back to the veranda. Before going inside, the boy glanced at the Bodhi canopy once more. The tree still stood solemn. A few leaves still fell. But in his heart, nothing was lost anymore. There were only things that arrive and leave, and a heart learning to open, to see, to laugh, to cry, and to laugh again. Outside the eaves, the wind chime tinkled softly. The smell of hot tea drifted from the kitchen, cradling the evening. The old temple folded back into quiet like a large hand of time, cupping itself to shield the night to come. And somewhere in the small footsteps heading toward the warm light, the dropped sadness was already sprouting into an early understanding. A falling leaf does not take autumn away, just as a passing moment does not take peace away, if we place peace where it belongs, in an open heart that can smile even as the leaf has just flown from our hand. That simple-sounding line from the teacher is in fact one of the deepest reminders about the nature of happiness. Happiness isn't in holding on, it's in the ability to savor something while it still exists. And that is exactly what so many of us forget amid today's hurried pace. People have a strange habit: when we meet something beautiful or precious, we want to keep it at any cost. A photo we love, we frame it. A sweet moment, we want it to last forever. A person who makes us feel at peace, we want them never to change. But precisely because we want to keep, we begin to fear losing. From that first moment of fear, we stop living in the present. We live only in the worry that it will go. Just like the little novice in the temple courtyard that day. He had cried out with delight when he picked up the last golden leaf of the season, yet burst into tears when it slipped from his hand and flew away. The leaf didn't sadden him because it fell. It saddened him because he believed it would stay. People are the same. Suffering doesn't come from change. It comes from our constant assumption that things will stay the same. We forget that impermanence is not an accident. It is the nature of things. Everything we love will change. Someone we love today will be different one day. A house we once dreamed of will weather under sun and rain. Achievements that once made us proud will fade into a faint footnote in others' memories. And even this very body, once vibrant, and the pride of youth, will slow weaken and age as life naturally dictates. The Buddha taught all conditioned things are impermanent, meaning anything that arises will pass. Nothing lies outside that flow. The sooner we truly understand this, the less we suffer. Because what hurts us isn't the loss itself, but our belief that we can keep what was born to pass through. What's wise is not to clutch, but to live fully while things are still beside us. A beautiful trip makes us both delighted and wistful because we know we'll have to go home. An evening gathered with family makes us laugh and want to cry because we know the moment won't repeat. Yet it is their brevity that makes those moments precious. They don't need to last to have meaning. They only need to be fully lived while they exist like that golden leaf, which didn't need to stay in the boy's hand to be beautiful. It was beautiful the moment he smiled while picking it up. Joy and sadness are both natural. Feeling sad when something ends is a very human response. What matters is not letting that sadness pull us out of the present. If we keep grieving what's gone, we'll miss what is here. Like the little novice, if he kept crying over the leaf that flew away, he wouldn't see the sky full of spinning gold all around him, a scene he might never see again. Today's world makes people fear loss more than ever. We fear losing money. We fear losing love. We fear losing youth status opportunity. Because we fear, we grip tight. We try to control everything planned for every scenario schedule, so nothing is missed. Stock up, so we won't be left behind. It feels proactive, but in truth, fear is steering us. And that fear quietly steals our capacity to enjoy. The tighter we squeeze, the more exhausted we become. Like a handful of sand, the harder you clench, the faster it slips away. Impermanence is not frightening. Impermanence is a gentle reminder. Live each moment deeply because it will not return. When we truly grasp this, we no longer want to hold. We simply want to be present. We look at the one we love as if it were the first time and could also be the last. We savor a simple meal as if it were the finest dish. We cherish a hug, a glance, a laugh, as if they were the brief little miracles life has granted us. Only then do we truly live, not to keep, but to feel. In the end, what gives a moment its value isn't how long it lasts, but how fully we live within it. Like a candle burning in the dark, no one remembers how long it burned. They remember that because of it, the night was a little less dark. And like that golden leaf, it didn't need to stay in our hand to leave behind a warm memory, the moment when a child smiled upon picking up the most delicate thing of autumn. Because we know everything will change, we learn to love rightly, not to possess, not to confine, not to demand that things stay, but to be quietly present with them, like the morning sun that only shines, never clutches anything. Then no matter the season, the falling leaves, or the changing people, we remain at peace, because we no longer live to keep, but to love. And there is something very important, something few pause to consider. Joy and sorrow are both valid, so long as we don't cling to them. Feelings are like winds coming and going, never staying with anyone forever. When something ends, tears may fall and sadness may visit. What matters is not letting that sadness harden into chains around the heart. When something good arrives, joy may surge and the heart may cheer. But don't let that joy turn into fear of losing it. Emotions aren't bad. Clinging makes them heavy. When we cling to joy, we begin to fear time will take it. When we cling to sorrow, we make it our identity, and it lasts longer than it should. Feelings should pass through the field of the mind, like breezes light, fleeting, leaving nothing entangled. Yet we often turn them into vines that coil around the heart, making every step heavy. Remember, everything will pass. Not only what is precious, but also what hurts most. Not only what we fear losing, but what we thought we could never endure. Tomorrow, today's pain will be a little lighter. Next year, what kept us up at night may be just a scrap of an old story. In 10 years, we may even smile, remembering what once made us cry. Time, if we don't cling, is a healing river. It doesn't erase memory, but it softens the sharp edges of hurt. It doesn't make losses vanish, but it helps us learn to hold the empty space as a natural part of living. Like the golden leaf in the novice's hand there, for only a moment, yet that moment was enough to brighten an entire late autumn afternoon. Beauty isn't in how long it remains, but in how deeply we live with it while it is here. So don't fear change. Don't treat change as proof of loss. See it as proof that life is ongoing. Without change, we could never begin again after mistakes, never grow from breakage, never see how far we've come from day one. The Buddha taught all phenomena are impermanent. Everything transforms without cease. Nothing stands still. Trying to hold something unchanging in a changing world is like trying to grasp a flowing stream. The tighter you grip, the faster it runs through. When we understand that we stop fighting the current and learn to float with it awake, life isn't measured by length, but by the depth of moments lived fully. One ordinary day lived wholeheartedly is worth more than a careless year. One sincere look lingers longer than 1,000 hollow praises. So don't wait for something to promise to stay before you dare to love it. Don't wait for certainty before you allow yourself to enjoy it. Love it while it is here in your hands, even knowing one light breeze could take it away. The secret of peace isn't in keeping everything unchanged. It's in the ability to smile at change. When you can smile like that, you no longer live in fear of losing, but in gratitude for having had. And only then do you begin truly living, not to accumulate, not to control, not to keep, but to be fully present, deeply and peacefully in each moment, knowing each is unique and also temporary. Because in the end, what remains is not what we manage to hold, but the gentle light we manage to give off in the brief time we touch them. Morning in the mountains was as clear as a bowl of rainwater left out overnight. The chill still lay on the stone slabs hid in the needle grass and curled thin as silk along the shoulders of the distant bamboo grove. On the pale sky, the first streak of light crept cautiously over the ridge, waking a lone bird whose song poured down into the valley. The scents of dew, damp earth, and early kitchen smoke from a few stilt houses blended together into a clean fragrance that made you unconsciously breathe more slowly. The dirt path to the riverbank was the same as ever. Water buffalo tracks had dried. A few pebbles glittered with dew. Years ago, the water here was as clear as a mirror. Whatever the sky passed by, it reflected. Silver clouds drifted like a flock of sheep. The river cradled the terraced fields, slipped between corn patches, and tapped a rippling rhythm on bamboo roots, as if someone were soothing a gentle child. On some afternoons, the young novice would sit on a flat rock, dangle his feet in the water, watch the ripples spread like patterns on his mother's blouse, and listen to the river tell stories of seasons past. This year, he returned his hand unconsciously feeling for the familiar flat rock. He stood still. Before him was no longer the green mirror. After a great flood season, the river had shifted course. The water was no longer crystal. It was muddy red, carrying fresh silt. The old bank was cracked like dry lips serrated with black streaks of mud. The new bank coiled in and out like a bold brushstroke on an unfamiliar page. The reed grass on the old bank bent low, its silvery leaves fluttering like old hair, while on the new bank, fresh green shrubs had just sprouted, their tender thorns still soft. He walked along the water's edge. His feet touched the cool, soft mud, leaving clear prints that were immediately licked by the water and half erased. The river's voice was no longer a gentle lullaby. It murmured hoarsely, sometimes rasping like someone's voice after a cough. Familiar bends had vanished, replaced by sharp turns that made the surface whirl like a child's curious eye peering back at itself. "Why is it like this?" he whispered, as if asking himself. Old images rose in his mind, a patch of sun-bamboo shadows, a fish flicking its silver tail set next to today's river, like two paintings in mismatched frames. Something in his chest sagged, a thin string pulled taut, then released, leaving a tingling aftersound. The master walking behind him had stopped at some point. He stood still on a higher patch of ground, where he could see the whole of the new river bend, hands folded at his belly, eyes as calm as a windless lake. His long brown robe brushed his ankles, dusted with white dew. The sun climbed a notch, sprinkling the first specks of gold on his silver hair. The boy turned back his voice, unable to hide his confusion. "Master, why is the river from before no longer the same?" The master didn't answer right away. He bent to pick up a dry twig, idly played with it, then dropped it into the current. The twig spun, once was carried away, snagged in an underwater eddy, then tossed up a few bright drops. His eyes followed the twig, his gaze skimming the surface like a light bottomless boat. Then he nodded gently and spoke slowly, his voice softening whatever it touched. "It's still water. It just no longer has its old shape." The boy looked up at him as if waiting for a beat. The master smiled very lightly, just enough to crease the corners of his eyes. "Just like you knew every day, and still you." A gust from the mountain pass rushed through. Goose flesh rose on the river's skin. Overhead, a flock of sparrows suddenly changed direction, drawing a small, dark streak across the blended sky. The boy looked down at the muddy water and suddenly noticed thin streaks of light in it. The sun had just touched it. The water was murky, yet it still sparkled. The river had taken a different path, yet it still flowed where it wanted to go. Last year's flood was huge. The master went on eyes still on the flow. The water gathered up boulders you'd think would never budge and carried them off. It built up this bank and cut away that one. People say the river betrayed the fields, but the river only did what a river must do when it carries the power of the rain. Come dry season, it's gentle again. One day, it will run clear again. But whether gentle or fierce, it's still water, and water always finds a way to flow. The boy looked at the cracked old bank where the reed grass hung its head. A question rose in his mind, quiet but aching. What about what's lost? Master. The master cupped a handful of water. It slipped through his fingers and returned to the current, leaving a coolness on his skin. He lifted his wet hands to the boy's eye level. "How long can you keep these drops?" "Not long," the boy said, watching them fall one by one without a sound. "But when they passed through your hands, they were still water. The way they touched your skin, their coolness, their sound as they fell, all of that was real. Do you call that loss or passing through?" The boy was silent. The wind puffed his robe lightly at the back. Across the way, a calf pressed against its mother tail, swatting tall grass. A woman crouched to wash a basket at the edge of the new water, the clatter of wicker on stone mingling with the churn of the current. The master sat on the old, flat rock and motioned the boy to sit beside him. From here, the river showed off its new curves like a different handwriting by the same author. "The year you left the village for the temple," he said, voice slow as counting, "you were timid eyes always to the ground. A year later, your step was steadier. You could meet people's eyes. 2 years after that, you could smile at strangers. Now you dare ask questions you never thought you could ask. You change every day. But if someone calls your name, you still turn. You just not in your old shape." The boy parted his lips to say something, then didn't. A gentle warmth ran along his side as if someone had set a hot sandbag there. He looked again at the old bank. The footprints of before had faded. A section had collapsed, exposing layers of red and yellow earth like a sliced sponge cake. He suddenly saw in what was lost, a stubborn truth: the river would not stand still just to please his memory. "Master, then should we keep things? Old landings, old paths?" The master picked up a small sun-dried pebble, rolled it in his hand, then tossed it lightly. It traced a tiny arc and struck the water with a clean tack, sending out concentric rings that lapped the new bank and broke against a tuft of young grass. "Keeping is lovely," he said, "but forcing yourself to keep is suffering. You can keep the memory of the old landing the way you keep a photograph. Now and then, you can take it out, gaze at it, and smile. But if you demand that today's river obediently flow exactly as it did yesterday, you'll be fighting the rain, the soil, the mountains, and the very rhythm of life. In the end, you'll be exhausted, and the river will still find its own way." The boy exhaled long, like a thin thread of smoke. On a corner of the new bank, he noticed unfamiliar buds that hadn't yet had names last year. New leaves opened like tiny hands greeting the morning. They grew from new earth fed by new silt, listening to a different river voice. They would become thickets, then shade where someone might stop one day when he himself was far away. The thought made his chest feel one notch wider. "Master, I'm afraid that someday I won't be me anymore." Afraid of changing, the master asked gently. "Yes, I'm afraid I'll drift away from myself." The master nodded. "Drifting away from the shell is necessary. Drifting away from the core, don't. The shell is old habits, old ways of thinking, old paths you walk because your feet are used to them. The core is the heart that wants to understand, to love, to live kindly. When you change how you walk but keep that heart, you've moved closer to your true self, not farther. Water, as mist, as rain, as river, as sea, its forms change. Its nature does not." The boy looked down at the river. A patch of sunlight lay on the surface, torn into countless trembling shards of gold. He let out a very soft laugh. "I understand. At least today." The master laughed too. He stood and dusted off his robe. "Then today, let's learn to walk along the new bank. Who knows, around another bend, you might find an even flatter rock to sit on." Master and novice walked along the water. Each step pressed prints into the fresh mud, which little waves then erased a patient game the river played. Above, the sun had cleared the bamboo ridge and poured down warm beams the wind sometimes kinked. The smell of new sunlight mixed with silt, raw yet sweet. At a bend, sure enough, there was a flat rock surface, smooth as if someone had polished it, lying bare in a young sandbar. He sat to try it. A small "oh" escaped him. The stone was warm enough, and his back could rest against a stunted trunk. In front, the water curved slowly, eddies faint. If he squinted, He could still see thin rays swimming through the murk like tiny fish made of sunlight. "Master, this spot is beautiful." The master said, eyes narrowing in a deeper smile. "Every new channel hides a new flat rock." The boy set his palm on the stone and heard his heartbeat steady. In his mind, the old pictures quietly stepped back, making room for the picture at hand. He turned and saw the master with eyes closed, lips moving as if reciting a verse meant only for the wind. Suddenly, he understood the old landing hadn't vanished. It had become a gentle piece in the basket of memory to take out and smile at on weary days. But now this is the landing, this water, this morning, this boy newer than yesterday's boy and still himself. Somewhere along the hillside, the hollow clonk of a water buffalo bell echoed low and long. The new river pulled a wide ribbon of light along the far bank slowly, as if teaching someone patience. He dipped his fingers into the water. Coolness shot up his spine. The water left his hand, rejoined the current, and didn't look back. He smiled, his heart light as a leaf, and the valley, as if in reply, breathed in the same rhythm. The crystal morning filled both cupped hands. The river kept flowing. Only today it wrote its name with a different stroke. That short line contains a truth many of us forget. Change is a natural essence, not something wrong. But people often fear change as if it meant losing themselves. There are times in life when a seemingly offhand remark like, "You weren't like this before," "You've changed," "You're not you anymore," can shake our hearts. The listener starts to question, am I veering off course? Am I losing myself? That doubt is in fact very human. Society quietly plants the notion that yourself is a fixed mold, an original that isn't allowed to differ. So when we begin to change our thinking, direction concerns, we feel guilty as if we were betraying our former version. But the truth is the opposite. Change is not loss. Change is shedding layers that no longer fit to come closer to the essence within. Like a river that after flood season shifts into a new channel, the shape, the bends, the color of the water all different, but the nature remains water tirelessly seeking the open sea. If you forced a river to stand still, it wouldn't be a river. It would become a stagnant pond, then dry up and rot. Life is the same. The Buddha taught impermanence, that all conditioned things change from instant to instant. Bodies change daily. Thoughts arise and pass without stopping. How could a self that has lived through seasons of love and hate, failure and hope remain fixed? The so-called true self isn't an unchanging form, but a continuous flow of growing up. Yet most of our suffering arises when we cling to an old version of ourselves. We fear disappointing others, so we keep living as the person they used to know. We fear losing the image we built, so we bury new dreams, new feelings, new choices. We live as if we were a stone statue, frozen yesterday's twin, so we can be loved, approved, and feel safe. But humans are not statues. We are rivers, and rivers cannot stand still. If they don't flow, water stagnates, turns foul, then dries up. Each day is a chance to renew yourself. You don't have to be yesterday. You don't have to return to the version others are familiar with. You may change how you think, how you love, how you forgive, how you pause or move on. Because with each day, new water flows through the old riverbed, and that very change is the living proof that you are still alive. Of course, changing isn't easy. When someone starts to be different, Those who knew the old version may no longer understand. They may doubt, criticize, even leave. They want that person to stand still because it makes them feel safe. But no one was born to be a permanent copy of themselves. Growing up always requires courage, stepping out of the familiar, taking off outdated masks, and exploring the deeper, truer layers of the self. That isn't losing yourself. It's finding your way back to the true nature, flexible, soft, always moving, always becoming like a river that never stops flowing toward the sea. One of the biggest reasons people get stuck in life is the fear of disappointing others. That fear keeps us maintaining old faces, old roles, old lifestyles that no longer fit, just so others can still recognize us as they once did. What we don't realize is that when we live like that long enough, a part of us begins to wither. No one is obligated to keep their old shape just to soothe others. Job title, style, mindset, social role. These are only temporary channels we pass through in life. They may once have mattered and been part of our identity, but they are not the whole of us. Clinging to them forever is like forcing a river to flow in its old bed when the water inside longs for a new way. And like a river, when the time comes, we must dare to shift course, not because what came before was wrong, but because the life within needs space to keep growing. The Buddha taught all conditioned things are impermanent. Impermanence isn't something to fear, it's a gentle invitation to let go of the old so we can receive what is newer and deeper. Many fear that if they change, they won't be themselves anymore. That's a misunderstanding. What makes you you isn't your outer form or label, but your nature. Water that moves to a new bank is still water. Likewise, a person who changes career, beliefs, lifestyle is still themselves, just a version closer to their own soul, with fewer layers that no longer fit. Maturity isn't about adding more, it's the courage to subtract what's no longer true. When a river shifts, it doesn't add water. It releases the old bed to find a wider, deeper, more fitting way for the current. People are the same. Sometimes growing up isn't becoming more, but daring to let go of what is no longer you things. Once right and beautiful, now past their time. Most important, no one needs permission to change. You don't need anyone's nod. You don't need approval to deserve newness. Change isn't a betrayal of the past. It's a sign of life. Trees shed leaves not because they hate the old, but because a new season arrives. The sky swaps clouds, not because they're ugly, but because the wind has shifted. A river changes course not to deny its journey, but to keep flowing. If you feel yourself changing today, don't be afraid. If you aren't who you were yesterday, don't be alarmed. You're not lost, you're moving on. And moving on is the most natural thing in the world. Change doesn't make you lose yourself. Change brings you closer to yourself. So don't strain to keep old versions just to ease others' minds. Let the old ego go so you're free to grow each day, because rivers weren't born to stand still. And neither were we. In the end, what's most worth remembering isn't who we once were in others' eyes, but how far we dared to go to come closer to our true selves. This life, as the Buddha taught, is a changing stream. All conditioned phenomena transform. And precisely because of impermanence, life can continue. As a river changes course so it doesn't dry up, as trees shed leaves to bloom again, as clouds disperse, so the sky clears each time we dare to change. life within us is reborn. We weren't born to be fixed versions of ourselves. We were born to grow, to transform, to keep shedding old shells that have grown tight and step by step come closer to our inherent clarity. Change doesn't take us away from ourselves. On the contrary, it shows we are still alive, still brave enough to walk on, still longing for the true light within. So don't be overly troubled by judging eyes. Don't let the fear of disappointing others tie you to outdated shapes. Live like a river. Don't ask permission to change course. Don't wait for approval to flow. Let your heart lead, because only by letting go of what is no longer you will you have the space to blossom again. And if someone says, "You're not the same as before," smile with gratitude. It only means you are moving on, growing up, drawing nearer to your true nature, where the heart can rest in a world that's always changing. If you feel these words speak to you, please subscribe to the Buddhism Seeds channel to keep walking the path of transformation, where every day we plant a seed of mindfulness, compassion, and peace. Don't forget to like and share this video with anyone who needs a gentle reminder, and leave a comment below. Have you ever had the courage to change course, to live true to yourself? We look forward to hearing your story, because every honest journey is a source of light.